Part 32. The Rebirth of Space, the Lucky Girl from a Farm Family. Author, He Would Fire Every. Chapter 311. Chapter 311 Liberation. The guards were ordered to leave. The king of Qin told Rugjuan, "Go to the Qingqiu Duke's mansion." Rugjuan replied, "Yes, I understand." When the British government heard the news, they took Yeshan's dowry list and said to Du Bin, "Manager Du, please let me watch. Let's count the items on the list one by one." "Okay." Du Bin nodded in agreement, "Okay." Just like the servants moved the things to the yard. Shuer saw what was going on in Linglong Garden and asked a woman to ask, "Okay, why did they touch the things in the ladies' courtyard?" The mother-in-law said, "The eldest lady has made peace with our prince. Aunt Yao and Ruhi are here to carry the eldest lady's dowry." After hearing this, Shuer was so shocked that she turned around and headed towards Rongan Hall. "Old madam, it's terrible, the eldest madam and the prince have made peace." Mrs. Yang was drinking tea when Shuer entered the room. After listening to Shuer's words, she spit out the tea with a pop and then coughed non-stop. Grandma Wang patted Mrs. Yang on the back and scolded, "You girl, when will you be able to calm down?" Mrs. Yang regained her composure and did not bother to blame Shuer. She asked, "You said that and that traitor have reconciled? Is it true?" Shuer nodded like a chicken pecking rice, "Really, Aunt Yao next to the eldest lady and Ru Yan next to the sixth master are counting the eldest lady's dowry in Linglong Garden." Old Mrs. Yang was so shocked by the sudden news that she jumped up from the soft couch, walked out quickly, took 2 steps, then turned around and walked back. Reconciliation? She is actually willing to reconcile. Mrs. Yang was walking around the room as she spoke. Grandma Wang said to Shuer, "You go down first." Shuer retreated with her maid and mother-in-law. Mrs. Yang said, "Tell me, how could she reconcile?" Grandma Wang said, "Old madam, does the eldest lady know about the poisoning?" Mrs. Yang looked at Grandma Wang and asked, "You mean, she knew we poisoned her and that's why she reconciled with the traitor?" Grandma Wang nodded, "If madam can survive, the poison in her body must have been detoxified. Since imperial physician who can detoxify, he can naturally diagnose the source of the poison and the time it was administered." Old Mrs. Yang nodded, "You are right. Now that the has escaped from the British government, she has jumped out of our hands. We have to be more careful." Grandma Wang said worriedly, "I don't know if the prince knows about it yet. If the prince knows, we not only have to guard against the sixth master's people, but also against the prince." Mrs. Yang was feeling uneasy. She looked at Grandma Wang with a bit of panic in her eyes. "Do you think that traitor will attack me?" Grandma Wang said worriedly, "The old servant is also a little worried. With the temperament of the prince, if he knew that we had done something to the eldest lady, he would definitely not let it go." Mrs. Yang thought for a while and said, "Don't scare yourself. Bichya has a noble and aloof character. She shouldn't say this to that traitor." Grandma Wang was still a little flustered and said, "I hope so. It's always good for us to be more cautious. We're not afraid of not getting 10,000, but just in case." Mrs. Yang nodded, "You are reminding us that we are staying in Rongan Hall recently. We should not hang out in the mansion. Even if we go to the toilet, we should not be alone, but in groups." Grandma Wang nodded in agreement. Lu Dinkin came out of the yamen, and Qin Zhen and Qing Mo greeted him. Lu Dinkin waved his hands towards them and said, "I'm going for a walk, you two don't have to follow me." After saying that, Lu Dinkin walked aimlessly along the street. Qin Zhen and Qing Mo looked at each other, and Qing Mo asked, "Deputy Envoy Qin, what should we do?" Qin Zhen looked at the direction Lu Dinkin left and said, "You lead the horse back, and I will follow you from a distance." Qing Mo nodded, "Okay. You follow me first, and I'll ask Lu Li to chase you." Qin Zhen nodded. Lu Dinkin walked to the door of a restaurant. The waiter stood on the road to receive customers. "Sir, would you like to eat? Good wine and excellent food." Hearing the word wine, Lu Dinkin turned around and entered the store. The waiter hunched over and followed in, asking, "Sir, do you want a private room or a seat in the lobby?" Lu Dinkin pointed to the corner. "I'll sit there and bring 2 kilograms of braised beef and a plate of peanuts. For the rest, you can add 2 more dishes and 2 jars of wine." "Okay. Sir, please take a seat. The wine and food will be served shortly." Soon, the waiter brought a plate of peanuts, a large plate of braised beef, a plate of diced pepper and sesame chicken, and a plate of hot kidneys. Lu Dinkin was sitting in the corner, drinking from the beginning to the end. He took a piece of silver and put it on the table, then walked out of the restaurant in a dangling way. When Qin Zhen and Lu Li met, they hurriedly came up to meet him and picked up Lu Dinkin, one on the left and the other on the right. Lu Dinkin turned to look at the two of them and said, "I'm not drunk, what are you two doing?" Lu Li put down Lu Dinkin and said, "Sir, are you sure you are not drunk?" Lu Dinkin raised his foot and kicked him over. "You dare to doubt me and don't want to live anymore." Lu Li quickly jumped to the side, avoiding Lu Dinkin's legs, and said with a smile, "It's better that the prince is not drunk." Lu Dinkin said, "Why don't you hurry up and drive the car over for me?" Lu Li leaned forward and said, "Master, wait a moment, I will drive over here." Qin Zhen supported Lu Dinkin and asked, "Master, are you really not drunk?" "I drank a lot today." Lu Dinkin shook his head, "I really want to get drunk. I haven't been back to the capital for a few years. The wine in the capital is all watery and doesn't have much flavor." Qin Zhen said, "It doesn't matter that I'm not drunk. I can use wine to relieve my sorrow and make it worse. The more I drink, the worse my mood becomes." Lu Dinkin leaned against Qin Zhen and said, "Yes, I wanted to feel better when I got drunk. Damn it, the more I drink, the more sober I get, and the more I drink, the more my heart hurts." Qin Zhen advised, "I and my wife have been married for more than 20 years, and the total time they have been together is less than half a year. It has not been easy for my wife to stay in the capital and in the mansion these years. It's good that the master and his wife are reconciled and divorced, and the wife is liberated. From now on, my wife no longer has to be rubbed by the old lady, and I can rest assured when I am away." Lu Dinkin was silent for a moment and said, "I was careless. If I had known that the old woman was so vicious, I would have dealt with her a long time ago." Qin Zhen sighed and said, "Who would have thought of it? There are very few people like the old lady in the world. Sir, the car is here, get in the car." Lu Li parked the car beside him and quickly set up the footrest. Qin Zhen helped Lu Dinkin into the car. LV Dinkin leaned against the carriage and said leisurely, "Tonight, the old sadistic woman was kidnapped, as well as Grandma Wang beside her. I want her head removed." Qin Zhen thought for a while and asked, "Okay. Where is the old lady? How do you plan to deal with it?" Lu Dinkin said calmly, "She has been doing evil for so many years, let her suffer some punishment in her later years, otherwise, I will not be able to get rid of my anger." Qin Zhen looked at Lu Dinkin and said worriedly, "But don't you have to worry about the prince and the empress? The old lady is their closest relative." Lu Dinkin said nonchalantly, "There is nothing to worry about. I will go to the border again after the new year. Even if the prince is angry with me, he can't do anything to me." Qin Zhen nodded, "Then how about destroying the old lady's hands and feet?" Lu Dinkin thought for a while and said, "The old abusive woman talks too much and has a poisonous tongue, so I'll deal with it all." Qin Zhen leaned forward and said, "Okay, I understand." Lu Dinkin returned to the British Duke's mansion, and Qing Mo came over to report, "Sir, everything in Linglong Garden has been moved." Lu Dinkin nodded, said nothing, and went straight to the study. Qing Mo still wanted to speak, but when Qin Zhen glared at him, he shut up and stopped talking. Rumo led a group of people to carry Yeshan's dowry out of the British palace and went to the Chinkuo palace in a grand manner. For a time, news of Yeshan's separation from the British Crown Prince Lu Dinkin spread in the capital. After receiving the report from the servants, Mrs. Ping simply packed up and hurried to the Chinkuo palace with Shi Yamei. Mrs. Jian received the letter and took Yamingjin to the second door. After Mrs. Ping got out of the car, she ignored the greetings and asked worriedly, "Where is Sister Shan? Are you okay? The British prince just returned to Beijing yesterday, why are you divorced today?" Mrs. Jian held Mrs. Ping's hand and walked inside. As she walked, she said, "Yingzi, you're here just in time. Sister Shan is in a trance today. Come and help persuade her." As he spoke, Mrs. Jian explained the cause and effect of the matter. After hearing this, Mrs. Ping cursed, "Sister Shan, why is she in a trance? Lu Dinkin deserves to die. Such a person, from a family like the British dukes, should have divorced 800 years ago. Where is Sister Shan? In where? I'll talk to her." Mrs. Jian said, "In her yard, Yan Ran is giving her acupuncture right now. You can just go over there. By the way, the prince has sent a banquet back, and he will stay for dinner in the evening." Mrs. Ping nodded in agreement, "Okay, I'll go and say hello to the old lady first, and then I'll go over." In Yeshan's courtyard, Gu Huayu put away the silver needles one by one and walked out of the house quietly. Just when King Qin was about to speak, Gu Huayu raised her index finger to her mouth to signal him to be silent. King Qin lowered his voice and asked, "Is your aunt asleep?" Gu Huayu nodded and whispered back, "Go to sleep. Aunt Shan has heavy dark circles under her eyes. She may not have had a good rest last night. Let her have a good sleep." King Qin nodded and turned to tell Zisu, "Have a good time serving your aunt." Gu Huayu said, "I'm afraid Aunt Shan will sleep until tomorrow morning. You stay here and ask others to be gentle and speak softly." Perilla bends its knees and responds. King Qin and Gu Huayu walked towards the courtyard gate and met Mrs. Ping, who came in a hurry. When Mrs. Ping learned that Yeshan had fallen asleep, she turned around and went to Qingfang Hall with Gu Huayu and King Qin. On the way, Mrs. Ping asked Yeshan about her condition and felt relieved when she learned that the poison had been cured and she was fine. He then asked, "Yan Ran, your haircut ceremony is scheduled for the first day of the winter lunar month. Have all the posts been sent out?" Gu Huayu shook her head, "I don't know. This matter is handled by my aunt, and I haven't asked about it yet." King Qin turned to look at Gu Huayu and asked, "Xiao's wedding ceremony is scheduled for the first day of the winter lunar month?" Gu Huayu nodded, "Yes, my grandmother and aunt made the decision together 2 days ago." King Qin showed some anticipation on his face and asked, "Madam, on the day when Xiao gets her hairpin, can I go and watch the ceremony?" End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, He Would Fire Every. Chapter 312. Chapter 312, Both Sides Suffer Losses. Mrs. Ping said, "Why not? Of course you can. The haircut ceremony is not just for female relatives. All important relatives can attend the ceremony." With Mrs. Ping's response, King Qin pursed the corners of his mouth and smiled like a bud. He turned to look at Gu Huayu with joy. "On the first day of the Lunar New Year, I will go to watch the ceremony." Looking at King Qin's delighted look, Gu Huayu and Jizhili suddenly felt a little more hopeful. They smiled and nodded, "Okay." Mrs. Ping looked at the two people who were flirting with each other. What else didn't she understand? He asked jokingly, "When does the prince plan to come to propose marriage?" The king of Qin looked at Gu Huayu fondly and said, "Xiao said she would wait until the next year." Looking at the affectionate look between the two, it is clear that they have entered each other's hearts. If two people are in love, shouldn't they stay together as soon as possible? Mrs. Ping looked at Gu Huayu and asked, Xiao, why do you want to be after the new year? Gu Huayu explained, I just returned to Beijing this year, and many things have not been sorted out, so I wanted to wait until the new year before proposing the marriage. It is already the end of October, and the new year is not far away. Mrs. Ping thought about it, then the Chinese New Year will be celebrated in 2 months. The three of them went to Qingfang Hall. Mrs. Jean learned that Yeshan had fallen asleep, so she asked Mrs. Jian to greet everyone for dinner. Yeshan he divorced, and from then on she cut off her relationship with the British government. Everyone in the Qingqiu government was happy for her, and there was joy everywhere in the house. After dinner, Mrs. Ping and Shi Yamei drank 2 cups of tea and then stood up to leave. Mrs. Jean asked Yeming how to send Mrs. Ping and her daughter back. Gu Huayu stayed until Yusha before getting up to say goodbye. Seeing Gu Huayu say goodbye, King Qin stood up and said, Grandma, I'm going back first, just in time to see Xiao off. Mrs. Jean said with a smile on her face, okay, let's go. Come and sit in the house when Yan Ran has free time. Gu Huayu responded, thank you, old lady, I will do it. Mrs. Jean and her entourage sent Gu Huayu to the second door. Gu Huayu said goodbye and got into the car. Unexpectedly, King Qin followed closely behind. The king of Qin's move not only stunned Gu Huayu, but also the people in Qingqiu's mansion. Gu Huayu stared at King Qin in shock and whispered, what are you doing? The old lady and the others are watching. She smiled at the Qin dynasty, nothing happened, and there are no outsiders. Grandma and the others are happy to see it happen. After speaking, King Qin raised the curtain and said, Grandma, Uncle, Aunt, we are going back first. Mrs. Jean was the first to come to her senses, smiled and waved her hand, okay, let's go. Gu Huayu blushed and waved to the Ye family outside the window, urging King Yu to drive away. At the same time, Gu Huayu reached out to King Qin's waist and pinched him hard. Ah, King Qin exclaimed exaggeratedly. When Gu Huayu heard King Qin's cry, she quickly raised her hand to cover his mouth. Gu Huayu didn't let go of her hand until the carriage left the house. Xiao, you are murdering your husband, King Qin whispered. Gu Huayu turned around and glared at him, I don't want you to be restrained in front of others. King Qin smiled and hugged Gu Huayu in his arms, why should I be restrained in front of my family? You didn't see my grandmother's eyes narrowing with laughter. How wonderful! Looking at King Qin's playful expression, Gu Huayu fell into a trance and had the illusion that she had lived to the present day. What's wrong, why are you so stupid and silent? Gu Huayu didn't know how to answer, so she changed the topic, why did Aunt Chan suddenly propose a divorce? This problem bothered Gu Huayu for a day. A few days ago, she gave Yeshan acupuncture to detoxify her body. When she said that she could nurse her body back and she could give birth to children, the eagerness and expectation on Yeshan's face were still vivid in her mind. The king of Qin briefly explained the matter. So that's the case, no wonder, when I saw Aunt Chan today, she looked like she had lost her soul, and her heart was hurt the most. Why is the prince like this? Has he ever had Aunt Chan in his heart? Gu Huayu sighed and continued, the prince doesn't think he is at fault, right? In his eyes, she is just a concubine. He had never had a concubine before, and he had a lot of concubines, and Aunt Chan didn't say anything wrong. Alas, women are so miserable and not easy. King Qin nodded, yes, that's what he thinks. The prince thinks that his aunt is his official wife. As long as he is around, no one in his concubines can go beyond his aunt. After hearing what King Qin said, Gu Huayu fell silent. She suddenly realized that Lu Dinkin's statement was not wrong. Who among men in this era doesn't have several concubines? As long as this man does not favor his concubines and destroy his wives, he is a responsible man. Like Lu Dinkin, anyone who defends his wife in front of his concubines is considered a good man. Women are born in such a society and are just appendages of men. Women cannot be jealous or jealous. Xiao, what are you thinking about? King Qin asked when he saw Gu Huayu in a daze. Gu Huayu came back to her senses, twitched the corner of her mouth, and said, from the perspective of a British prince, what he did was not wrong. As he said, which man doesn't have several concubines? King Qin replied, yes, according to the laws of Daxing, what the prince did is not out of line. Even if he takes a concubine, his aunt has nothing to say. Then why did he want to reconcile? Qinjian, did you threaten him? King Qin shook his head and said, I think he threatened me before it was too late. He agreed to divorce after reading the letter his aunt gave him. Oh, Aunt Chan wrote him a letter. King Qin nodded, I don't know what my aunt said, but the prince shed tears after seeing it, and then agreed to the divorce. The staunch man shed tears? Gu Huayu felt an indescribable feeling in her heart. Her previous indignation towards Lu Dinkin suddenly lost her position. Thinking about Yeshan's lonely look, and then Lu Dinkin's tears. I couldn't help but sigh in my heart, two people who love each other will either be happy or both will suffer. Gu Huayu sighed, everything is fate. From now on, let's spend more time with Aunt Chan and let her get out of this relationship as soon as possible. The king of Qin responded, okay. Is everything going well with the Ministry of Justice? Gu Huayu asked. King Qin said, we have just passed, and it is not smooth or unsatisfactory. Don't worry about me. The purpose of my trip is just to investigate the cases from that year. The carriage stopped, Your Majesty, Princess, we have arrived at Wutong Lane. Gu Huayu said, I'm here, King Yu will take you back. With that said, Gu Huayu was about to stand up. King Qin put his arm around Gu Huayu's waist and asked, what are your plans for tomorrow? Gu Huayu said, I accompanied Mrs. Fang from the Wang mansion to the Fang mansion to help her brother have his eyes checked. King Qin asked in surprise, what, didn't the lady from the Wang family beat your second sister? Why did you go to the Fang family for medical treatment? What did I miss? Gu Huayu smiled and said, some fates are destined long ago. The day before yesterday, Mrs. Fang came to apologize. Grandma recognized Mrs. Fang as her childhood friend. Also, when Grandma and the others were in Wanfu, they were treated by Wang Shilang. Grace. Really? Is there such a thing? Tell me in detail what is going on. Gu Huayu saw that King Qin didn't want to separate, so she simply nestled in his arms and talked to him slowly. The two of them talked in a nonchalant manner for more than half an hour. Gu Huayu looked at her watch and said, it's already the first quarter of the first lunar month. You have to go to court tomorrow, so go back and have a rest. King Qin's hand did not let go, I can't bear to be separated from you, so I just want to hold you in my arms like this. Gu Huayu kissed King Qin on the face and said, good boy, it's getting late, go back early. I'll come back from Fang Mansion tomorrow and pick you up at the Xingbu Yamen, okay? Seriously, King Qin lowered his head and looked at Gu Huayu. Gu Huayu stretched out her little finger and said, come on, come on. King Qin stretched out his little finger and hooked Gu Huayu's hand, I hooked it. You must come tomorrow. Then we go back to the palace. If you lose the bet, you have to cook a delicious meal for me. Gu Huayu nodded in agreement, okay, I'll prepare something delicious for you tomorrow. King Qin raised his hand and rubbed Gu Huayu's forehead, little guy, I'm looking forward to it. See you tomorrow. The king of Qin got out of the car and sat on the carriage behind him. Only then did Gu Huayu realize that Rugjuan's car had been following her. Gu Huayu watched King Qin's carriage leave before asking Qing Yu to drive into the mansion. Wang Qin came over and asked after the greeting, is Mrs. Ye okay? Are you really reconciled with the British prince? Gu Huayu nodded, we are divorced. I am a little depressed. It may take some time to recover. Have grandma and the others rested? Wang Qin replied, the old lady and my uncle have rested. Are you hungry, princess? Do you want someone to make some midnight snacks? Gu Huayu shook her head, I'm not hungry. It's getting late. Aunt Wang, go and have a rest. You guys should go and have a rest too, Gu Huayu told Liwa and Begonia. Farewell to Wang Qin, Gu Huayu took Liandong to Gu Chenjuan's yard. Hengxia heard the noise and asked in a low voice, who? It's me, Gu Huayu responded. Hengxia heard Gu Huayu's voice and came out. Gu Huayu saw that she was moving lightly and asked in a low voice, second sister, have you rested? Hengxia bent her knees and replied, yes, the second lady has been resting for half an hour. Gu Huayu asked, how is the second sister today? Are you okay? Hengxia couldn't hide the joy on her face and said excitedly, second miss is in much better condition today than yesterday. Her body no longer hurts. She had a bowl of rice and a bowl of soup for dinner. Gu Huayu knew it was the effect of the elixir, nodded and said, let the second sister continue to take the elixir. Yes, the second lady will obey everything the princess tells her. Gu Huayu warned, okay, serve the second sister well. When the second sister takes a break, you should also take a rest. Don't work too hard. Hengxia bent her knees to express her thanks. Gu Huayu returned to her yard and listed the menu for tomorrow, stir-fried duck with ginger, stewed shrimp and tofu, steamed mandarin fish, braised chicken soup, and braised cabbage. After listing the menu, Gu Huayu read it twice. There were both meat and vegetables, and she was very satisfied. He then listed the ingredients and gave the list to Lonicera, give this to Jungzhen tomorrow morning and ask him to pick up the ingredients in the middle of the day and send them to the palace. Lonicera nodded in agreement. After the court dispersed on the second day, King Qin walked out of the palace. When he reached the door, he met Lu Zijian who was in a hurry. King Qin wanted to greet him, but Lu Zijian didn't seem to see him and walked straight to King Xian. King Qin glanced at Lu Zijian and King Xian, then turned to look for Rugjuan. Rugjuan immediately came over and said in a low voice, Sir, something happened to the British government last night. King Qin paused, looked at Rugjuan, and motioned for him to continue. Rugjuan looked around and said, let's get in the car first. King Qin nodded and walked towards his carriage. After getting on the carriage, King Qin asked, what's going on? What happened to the British government? Rugjuan said, I received a tip-off this morning that the old lady left the house last evening and did not return all night. She was abandoned at the gate of the British government house early this morning. Grandma Wang who was beside the old lady was separated. The old lady's hands and feet were cramped, and her tongue was cut out. King Qin frowned when he heard this and asked, how long ago did you get the news? Have you checked it? Who did it? Rugjuan said, I have sent someone to check the letter I received half an hour ago, but no letter has been returned yet. King Qin frowned and asked, who could it be? No wonder neither the British Duke nor the Crown Prince will come to court today. Rugjuan asked, Sir, do we want to go over and have a look? King Qin shook his head, no need for the moment, let's go to the Ministry of Punishment first. Lu Zijian just went to find the Xian King. When the Xian King finds out, he will report it to his father soon. The old lady is the royal wife and the biological mother of concubinda, so the emperor will not ignore her. Furthermore, this matter is not trivial. If something like this happens, the British government will definitely report it to the official, and the Jingzhou government will also report it. His father will definitely order the Ministry of Punishment to cooperate with the Jingzhou prefecture to conduct a strict investigation. Then we will follow the people from the Ministry of Punishment. Rugjuan bowed and responded, okay, I understand. Rugjuan drove to the Ministry of Punishment. Sure enough, not long after King Qin arrived at the Ministry of Punishment, the Minister of Punishment was announced to the palace. On the other side, Gu Huayu followed Mrs. Fang to Fang's house along the outer road. Mrs. Fang was worried that her mother's family would be too enthusiastic and frighten Gu Huayu, so she introduced it to Gu Huayu in advance. After my father passed away, my elder brother and younger brother separated the family and divided the house into east and west courtyards. Elder brother Fang Qingshu's family lives in the east courtyard, and his younger brother Fang Qinglin's family lives in the west courtyard. Although we have separated and live alone, the brothers are still very friendly and as close as one family. When someone's family has trouble, people from the other family will take the initiative to step forward and share the burden. They knew that the princess was coming over to treat her brother's eye disease, so she would definitely take leave and stay home. The princess will see you soon. Don't be alarmed. These nephews and nephews from my mother's family are all very friendly people. Gu Huayu responded with a smile, okay. I understand. With Mrs. Fang's psychological preparation in advance, Gu Huayu felt much calmer when she saw the Fang family. However, she was still moved by the Fang family's enthusiasm. After some pleasantries, Gu Huayu said to Mrs. Fang, let's go see Mrs. Fang first. Mrs. Fang even agreed to take Gu Huayu to her brother's yard in person. After Gu Huayu examined Fang Shuking's eyes, he determined that they were cataracts. The old lady's eye disease is similar to the eye disease my grandmother suffered from. I asked someone to send the old lady to King Grantang on Yongchun Road, and we will get treatment there. Mrs. Fang said, now. Or does it need to be done another day? It's okay to send him there now. This place is not far from Yongchun Road. Go there now. My shop is not big and can't accommodate so many people. Just choose 2 of you to go with us. You don't have to go there all. Mrs. Fang turned around and asked her nephew Fang Yong to do something. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 313. Chapter 313 showing prestige. So, the Fang family sent Fang Qingshu to King Grantang. Gu Huayu performed cataract surgery on Fang Qingshu. Ruhi gave Fang Qingshu a prescription and told him to pay attention to it before letting the Fang family take Fang Qingshu back. After the Fang family left, Ruhi said, Master, something happened to Mrs. Yang of the British Duke's Palace. I went to the British Palace with the people from the criminal department. I asked the master to go to the prince's palace first. I will return to the prince's palace after I finish my work. Gu Huayu asked, something happened to the old woman? What happened? Do you know? Ruhi recounted what happened to Mrs. Yang. After hearing this, Gu Huayu asked, do you know who did it? Ruhi shook his head, I don't know yet. It's heaven's way to reincarnate. The old lady has been arrogant for many years. She probably never thought in her dreams that she would suffer such a disaster when she gets old. Gu Huayu said while washing her hands, all fruits have their causes, good and evil will eventually be rewarded. The old woman deserves it. Where is Hija? Why haven't you seen him? The child of green light, Xiaobao, begged Gu Huayu to name him. Gu Huayu asked him whether he would like to be named Lu or Gu, but Xiaobao did not want to be named Lu. Gu Huayu asked him to take his surname and name him Gu's Hija. Ruhi pointed to the next door and said, Zai and Zhiji are reading in the next room. Zai is the first name of Sui Gear, and Zhiji is the first name of junior high school. Gu Huayu was stunned and asked, what book are you reading? About medicine. Gu Huayu asked as she went to the next room. Ruhi replied, Zai is reading the general history of the previous dynasty, and Zhija and Zhiji are reading books on medical theory. Gu Huayu walked to the door, lifted the curtain, and saw brother Sui sitting at the desk. engrossed in writing something. Shija and Chu met together and didn't know what to say. Brother Sui looked up and saw Gu Huayu, stood up and called, "Sister-in-law." Shija and Chui I heard Brother Sui's voice and looked towards the door. When they saw Gu Huayu, they immediately stood up and said, "Master." "Sister-in-law." Gu Huayu walked into the room with a smile, "What are you reading?" Brother Sui turned over the book on the desk and showed it to Gu Huayu, "Sister-in-law, I am reading the general history of the previous dynasties." Shija imitated Brother Sui and showed the cover of the book, "Master, I am reading a book of sketches." On the first day of the year, he raised the book in his hand and said, "Sister-in-law, what I am reading is also a collection of sketches." Gu Huayu looked at Shija and said, "Have you finished all the homework assigned by Sir?" Shija lowered his head and whispered, "I've memorized the book, but the words haven't been written yet." Gu Huayu looked at Chu Yi, "What about you?" On the first day of the year, he glanced at Gu Huayu with a guilty conscience, just like Shija, he only memorized the book but has not written any words. Compared with reading, writing is much boring. Gu Huayu also came from a child, so she naturally understood the psychology of the two of them, and said with a straight face, "Hurry up and write, you need to practice calligraphy for half an hour every day, don't be lazy." Chushi and Shija bowed their heads and said, "I understand." Gu Huayu said to Brother Sui, "Brother Sui also needs to work his calligraphy. Just like the two of them, practice calligraphy for half an hour every day." Brother Sui leaned forward and said, "Yes. Thank you, sister-in-law. Zai has written it down." Subsequently, Gu Huayu took a test on the homework of Keijia and the first grade of junior high school. Seeing that both of them could answer the questions, she nodded with satisfaction, and after a few words of encouragement, she left the room. Gu Huayu came out of the house and saw Ruhi treating someone. He didn't bother him and just made a leaving gesture towards him. Ruhi nodded, indicating that he understood. Gu Huayu came out of King Grantang, got on the car, and ordered King Yu, "Go to Prince Jin's mansion." King Yu nodded in agreement and drove to Prince Jin's mansion. Shi Niang received the letter from Rug and went to the gate early to wait. At this moment, when he saw Qing Yu driving his car, he said hurriedly, "No need to stop, just go straight into the house." King Yu drove the car into the house through the side door next to the main gate and stopped at the screen wall. Shi Niang followed, stepped forward and raised the car curtain. "Hello, princess." Gu Huayu got off the car and asked, "Has the prince returned yet?" Shi Niang replied, "Back to the princess, the prince has not returned yet. If Rujing comes back to report, the prince will probably not be able to return to the house until later." The king of Qin now serves in the Ministry of Justice, and Gu Huayu understands in her heart that if something like this happens in the British government, the king of Qin will be involved in both public and private matters. "I understand. Can Zhengzhen bring the ingredients?" "Sent it here, it has been placed in Sheahua Pavilion," Shi Niang replied. "The ingredients are brought here, shouldn't they be sent to the kitchen?" Gu Huayu asked. "Sheahua Pavilion." Shi Niang explained, "Sheahua Pavilion is the prince's study and the prince's living room." "So what?" "After the prince opened his mansion, the imperial concubine assigned some people to the mansion just in case." Shi Niang's last words were not spoken, but Gu Hua understood them clearly and couldn't help but feel sad for the king of Qin. When he was in the British government, he had to guard against Mrs. Yang, Mrs. Li and others. Now that he has become the king of Qin and has his own palace, he still has a strong barrier in his heart and must not be careless. Gu Huayu sighed slightly and asked, "Are you also responsible for Sheahua Pavilion?" Shi Niang shook her head, "No, Leshun is in charge of Sheahua Pavilion." "Princess, the prince will tell you to go directly to Sheahua Pavilion, have lunch first, and then take a break. When the prince comes back, he will accompany you to cook dinner." Gu Huayu smiled and said, "Let's go. I'm hungry." Let's eat first. Shi Niang took Gu Huayu to Sheahua Pavilion, and Lai Shun led the servants to welcome him outside the Sheahua Pavilion. When Daong saw Gu Huayu, he bowed respectfully to Gu Huayu as if meeting his mother. Shi Niang smiled and moved towards Gu Huayu, and asked in a low voice, "Princess, look how respectful they are. When will you, the mistress of the house, get married?" Gu Huayu turned around and bared her teeth at Shi Niang, and warned fiercely, "Shut up." Shi Niang leaned back and said with a smile, "Okay, I'll shut up." Lai Shun couldn't help laughing, bowed, and said politely, "Princess, please come in." Gu Huayu turned around and said, "Okay. Lead the way. Fairy Stinky Feet, please take it easy for me." Gu Huayu did not forget to warn Shi Niang. Lai Shun led the way and let Gu Huayu into the dining room. The waiter brought warm handkerchiefs, water, and various dishes in a flowing manner. After Gu Huayu washed her hands and face, she looked at the full table and couldn't help but frown. When Lai Shun saw Gu Huayu frowning, he leaned over and explained, "The prince said that the princess would come for lunch." The cook didn't know the princess's taste, so he made a few more dishes. Gu Huayu said, "It's too extravagant. I'm not picky about food. From now on, I can just let them do whatever they want." Lai Shun bowed and responded, "Yes, I have written it down." Gu Huayu pointed at 3 items and said, this, keep this, take the others away for everyone to eat." Lai Shun turned his head and winked at the waiter, who saw the opportunity and stepped forward to remove the dishes. Gu Huayu looked at Shi Niang and asked, "You haven't eaten yet? Sit down and eat with me." Just when Shi Niang was about to speak, Gu Huayu said first, "Don't talk to me about etiquette. We are still the same as when we were in Shishan." Shi Niang smiled and said, "Okay. Then it's better for me to be respectful than to obey." With that said, Shi Niang sat down opposite Gu Huayu. The two of them had dinner and drank a cup of tea. Shi Niang said, "Princess, why don't you go and have a rest first?" Gu Huayu shook her head, stood up and said, "No, let's go to the kitchen. I'm going to make chicken soup today, and I need to stew the chicken first." Shi Niang stood up and said, "Okay, the princess will come with the servant." Gu Huayu followed Shi Niang to the kitchen. Shi Niang said to the people in the kitchen, "You guys go and have a rest. We have half a day off today." Gu Huayu didn't find the chicken in the food cabinet, so she turned around and asked the cook who was getting an apron, "What's your surname? Didn't Jungzin send any chicken?" The cook leaned forward and said, "Go back to the princess. My surname is Du. The princess's people have sent it to you. They are in the backyard." Gu Huayu asked, "Are the chickens he sent alive?" Chef Du nodded, back to the princess, "Yes, I gave you a chicken, a duck, and a fish, all alive." Gu Huayu was speechless. She spread her hands to Shi Niang and said, "It seems that my instructions are not clear." Shi Niang smiled and said, "Nothing, I'll ask them to help the princess take care of it." The cook saw the opportunity and said, "Princess, wait a moment, the younger one will take care of it." After saying that, the cook put his apron back on and went to the backyard to collect the chickens, ducks, and fish. Gu Huayu then checked the other ingredients. Fortunately, there was nothing wrong with the other ingredients. Soon, Chef Du led 2 women to bring in the chicken, duck, and fish. Gu Huayu thanked her profusely, so shocked that Chef Du and the mother-in-law couldn't help it. Gu Huayu said with a smile, "This time, you can really go and have a rest." Chef Du pointed at the chicken and duck and asked, "Princess, would you like to chop the smaller ones?" Gu Huayu shook her head, "Thank you, no, I can handle it next." After Chef Du left, Shi Niang looked at the chicken, duck, and fish on the table and said, "Princess, what should I do first?" Gu Huayu first scalded the chicken with boiling water, then stuffed the sliced ginger and knotted green onions into the belly of the chicken. Then she put the chicken into a casserole, added water, put it on the fire, and waited for the water to boil. Finally, use a spoon to skim off the foam on the surface, then cover more than half of the fire with an iron plate, and change to low heat to simmer. Okay, let's simmer slowly. Let's go to the door and sit and wait. The king of Qin took Rugjuan and accompanied Zhang Qingyun, the minister of the Ministry of Punishment, to the gate of the British Duke's mansion. Along with Zhang Qingyun, there were also Zheng Shilang of the Ministry of Punishment and Li Chang, who had just been transferred to the Ministry of Punishment as a foreign minister. Ruan Chu and his guards were already waiting at the door. When Ruan Chu saw King Qin, he stepped forward to greet him. After the two parties met, King Qin asked, "When did you arrive? What's the situation inside now? Do you know?" Ruan Chu leaned over and said, "Go back to your lord, I'll come here as soon as I receive the letter. It's been almost an hour. Before I arrived, the people from Jingzhou Mansion had already gone in. Not long after I arrived, Dr. Hu and Dr. Su arrived. Soon, people from Prince Yen's mansion also arrived. Just a quarter of an hour ago, concubine brought people in." After hearing this, Zhang Shangshu said to King Qin, "Your Majesty, let's go in." King Qin nodded, "Okay, let's go. You too." The king of Qin responded to Zhang Shangshu and turned around to explain to Ruan Chu. Ruan Chu bowed down and stepped down. The king of Qin entered the mansion. When the servants saw him, they bowed to him one after another. The king of Qin asked, "Where is the old lady?" "Rong'an Hall." The servant leaned forward and said, "My lord, yes, the old lady is in Rong'an Hall. The duke of the country, the crown prince, the wise king, and the empress are all in Rong'an Hall at this time." King Qin nodded, turned to Zhang Shangshu and said, "Mr. Zhang, please follow me." Zhang Shangshu bowed politely and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." "Your Majesty, please." The king of Qin and his entourage went to Rong'an Hall. Along the way, there are 3 posts and 1 sentry every 5 steps. They are all servants of Jingzhou Mansion. The king of Qin and his entourage arrived at the gate of Rong'an Hall and saw Gao Tuiguan and his people guarding the place. The high-ranking official met the king of Qin and others, and bowed his hands in greeting to everyone. Zhang Shangshu said politely, "I have been ordered by the emperor to assist Lu Fuyan in investigating this case." Gao Tuiguan arranged his body. "Zhang Shangshu, please," Lu Fuyan was reporting to Defei Niang. King Qin and his entourage entered Rong'an Hall and heard Concubine's furious scolding, "No matter what method you use, I give you 3 days to find out the real murderer. I will cut this person into pieces." Lu Fuyan said, "Your Majesty, please calm down. I will do my best to find out the real culprit as soon as possible and give you an explanation." As King Qin and others got closer, they heard Mrs. Yang's painful scream. Her voice was hoarse, and it was horrifying to hear. Lu Zixun, who was standing on the corridor, saw King Qin and his entourage approaching. He waved his fists and rushed towards King Qin with angry eyes. He cursed, "You ungrateful villain! The Lu family has raised you for more than 20 years, and you actually did this. If something so unscrupulous happens, I will fight with you." Seeing Lu Zixun rushing over, Ruan Chu stepped forward to block the middle, protecting the king of Qin behind him, and scolded, "Bold madman, dare to disrespect the prince, someone will come and capture him." Immediately, 2 guards rushed up from behind Zhang Shangshu and others, one on the left and one on the right, holding down Lu Zixun, kicking him to the ground. The big and small Lis who were standing aside saw it and ran over one after another, shouting, "Zixun!" How old was Li? She quickly realized what she was doing, raised her head to look at King Qin, and begged King Qin, "Your Majesty, Zixun is heartbroken for his grandmother," so he spoke uncontrollably out of desperation. "Please ask King Qin to see that you can grow up together. Please forgive Zixun this time." Although Lu Zixun was pushed to the ground by the guards, his expression did not calm down at all. Seeing Madame Li begging for mercy for him, he turned to Madame Li and shouted, "Auntie, don't beg this ungrateful thing. His heart is being eaten by dogs, only then would he do such a thing as repaying kindness with hatred." Ruan Chu took a step forward, raised his hand and slapped Lu Zixun twice. With two heavy sounds of pop, pop, Lu Zixun's head moved left and right with Ruan Chu's waving hands. Suddenly, Lu Zixun's face swelled at a speed visible to the naked eye. Lu Zixun felt his face numb, and at the same time, a sweet and fishy smell came from his mouth. Lu Zixun spit out ba, a white tooth was wrapped in bright red blood. Mrs. Li was so frightened that she burst into tears. While crying, he said, "Zixun, shut up. King Qin, please show your respect." Ruan Chu stopped his hand and stood up and said, "There are many officials from the Ministry of Punishment here. If they dare to offend the subordinates and disrespect the prince, they should be executed according to the laws of Daxing. I will give you 2 slaps in the face. I am being polite to you." Lu Zixun was stunned, but was brought back to consciousness by Mrs. Li's cry. Looking up at King Qin, he was about to curse again, but after hearing Ruan Chu's words, he didn't dare to say anything again. "Yo, the King of Qin shows off his power and comes to the British government." Concubine came out of the room and stared at King Qin with cold eyes. Thanks to book friends 15136660835808651854 568 for the reward. Thank you for your support and encouragement. Thank you for all your votes, thank you. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 314. Chapter 314 Suspicion. Everyone went to see Concubine. Upon seeing the ceremony, King Qin stood up and said, "You are showing off your prestige." Where did the concubine's words start? This king has not said a word since he entered Rong'an Hall. Where does the prestige come from? Concubine looked at Lu Zixun, who was swollen into a pig's head, and asked, "You didn't show off your authority, why did Zixun's face look like this? Wasn't it the King of Qin who beat him?" King Qin said, "That is a good question from Concubine. Then why didn't Concubine ask me why my men wanted to beat him?" Concubine stared at King Qin and took 2 steps forward. Something happened in the palace. Zixun was anxious and his emotions were inevitably a little out of control. The King of Qin has lived in the British government for more than 20 years. The British government raised you with no credit but hard work. The King of Qin didn't remember his kindness, and he allowed his subordinates to fight. Doesn't King Qin feel ashamed? Facing Concubine's indignant accusation, King Qin said calmly, "I don't think so." Concubine was so angry that she gritted her teeth. "You." Lu Xiren on the side took over and said, "Madam, calm down, what happened today is Zixun's fault." King Qin was surprised by Lu Xiren's attitude. He looked up and saw Lu Xiren standing by the pillar of the corridor with an expressionless face. He didn't know what he was thinking. Concubine glanced at Lu Xiren coldly and said angrily, "Zixun is your brother." Lu Xiren bowed his hands and said respectfully, "Thank you, madam." Xiren knows that Zixun and Xiren are brothers from the same mother. Concubine was so choked by Lu Xiren's words that she almost lost her breath. She clenched the handkerchief in her hands with both hands and glared at Lu Xiren with a livid face. Then she turned her eyes to Lu Dingning, who was 4-5 steps away from Lu Xiren. Angrily, "Okay, very good, the good boy who was raised by the second brother dares to contradict me." Lu Dingning glanced at King Qin awkwardly, then took a peek at Concubine, and cursed in his heart, "When gods fight, little devils suffer." He couldn't afford to offend both sides. Lu Dingning smiled apologetically and said to 11Ni, "We are all a family. If you have anything to say, let's sit down and talk slowly. Why do we have to be like needles against wheat awns?" There is nothing wrong with what Lu Dingning said. The king of Qin was the nephew of concubine from his natal family when he was Luzikin. The king of Qin was the eldest son of the queen during the reign of Zhou Jinghong. No matter how you calculate it, he and she are a family. Concubine was dizzy with anger and said without hesitation, "Who is with him?" "Mother's concubine." "Why are you standing outside?" "How is grandma?" Xian Wang's voice and Lu Ziqiu's voice sounded at the same time. The king Xian stood at the door, his eyes fell on Lu Ziqiu, and he secretly breathed a sigh of relief. The words of the concubine just said in front of several ministers, and it would be a big deal. De Fei did not realize her mistake. However, his words were interrupted and he did not continue. Everyone turned to look over and saw Lu Ziqiu hurried over with her maid, followed not far away by Huaru Iming. When Lu Ziqiu saw concubine, with tears in his eyes, he greeted concubine and said, "Ziqiu pays my respects to the empress." Concubine looked at Lu Ziqiu who was kneeling on the ground, her face softened, and she stepped forward and bent down to help Lu Ziqiu up. "Okay, Ziqiu is a good person. Your grandmother's love for you is not in vain. Let's go in and see your grandmother." Lu Ziqiu nodded in agreement, turned around and saw Mr. Li kneeling on the ground and Lu Zixun, who was almost unrecognizable. He asked in surprise, "Why are you kneeling here? Are you the second brother?" Before Li and Lu Zixun could reply, the British Duke came out of the room. The British Duke said, "Ziqiu, go in and see your grandmother." Lu Ziqiu looked at Li and Lu Zixun, nodded and said, "Yes, grandfather." Huaru Iming approached and greeted concubine first, then the King Xian, the King of Qin, the Duke of England, and all the other lords. When Huaru Iming came down to greet them, the British father-in-law said to Li and her son who were kneeling on the ground, "Things that will only cause trouble should get up and go back to your own courtyard." Li helped Lu Zixun stand up. Ruan Chu looked at King Qin and saw that King Qin pursed his lips and did not make things difficult, so he stood upright next to King Qin, as if the previous unhappiness had not happened. Lu Dinkin raised his hands to Zhang Qingyun and others and said, "Such a tragic incident happened at home, which has made all of you very hard. Please come to your room." Zhang Shangshu cupped his hands and said, "Your Majesty, you're welcome. I have been ordered by the Emperor to investigate this case together with Mr. Lu." The British Duke raised his hands and said, "My lords, please come this way." Zhang Shangshu said, "You don't have to be polite, Lord, it's important to deal with official business. Let's take a look at the old lady and the injured slave first." Lu Fuyan leaned forward and said, "Sir Zhang, Dr. Hu and Dr. Su are treating the old lady. It is not appropriate to ask at this time." The body of the victim slave was parked in the side courtyard, and Chi Wuzuo was still there to check. Did Mr. Zhang go there in person or send someone to check? Zhang Shangshu turned to look at Li Cheng and said, "Li Yuan Weilang went over to take a look on my behalf, okay." Li Cheng leaned forward and said, "I'll do as you please." After saying that, Li Cheng bowed his hands to everyone and led two officers to the side courtyard. Zhang Shangshu and others followed Lu Dinkin into the reception room of Rongan Hall. Concubine sat at the top, King Qin and King Xian sat on the left and right nearest to the top. King Xian was next to the Duke of England, and King Qin was next to Shang Shizhang. The other officials took their seats one after another. Ruan Chu stood upright behind King Qin. "Wait for the maid to serve tea and then leave." Zhang Shangshu looked at Lu Fuyan and asked, "Have you checked? How did the old lady leave the house yesterday?" Lu Fuyan said, "After checking, the maid in the mansion said that at the time of application yesterday, a person who looked like a chamberlain came to the mansion. He said he was from Prince Xian's mansion and was ordered by Prince Xian to take the old lady to Prince Xian's mansion. Reunion with Empress Dowager De." The visitor urged her urgently, saying that the Empress would return to the palace soon, so the old lady got into the man's car with her accompanying nanny. What happens next is tragic. Concubine said, "The Japanese palace did not leave the palace yesterday. The wise king looked at concubine. Concubine, don't worry, listen to Zhang Shangshu, Lu Fuyan, and others said. Concubine looked at everyone and shut up and stopped talking. Zhang Shangshu smiled awkwardly, turned his attention to the British father, and then asked, the old lady didn't return last night, and the house didn't find out. The British Duke sighed and said, I went to see the king for tea yesterday and didn't return home until soon. Because I came back late, I rested in the outer courtyard and did not come to the backyard. Zhang Shangshu turned his attention to Lu Dinkin. Where is the prince? Doesn't the prince know that the old lady is out? Qin Zhen, who was behind Lu Dinkin, took over. Yesterday, the prince went to Jingzhou mansion to settle matters with his wife. After coming out of Jingzhou mansion, he was in a bad mood, so he walked along the street at the entrance of Jingzhou mansion. We walked forward until we reached the entrance of Songbei Alley and entered the delicious restaurant at the entrance of the alley. The prince had been drinking in the restaurant for more than 2 hours and was very drunk. It was almost midnight when I brought the prince back. The prince is too drunk to come to pay his respects to the old lady. The young man sent someone to the backyard to inform the old lady. The maid from Rongan Hall said that the old lady had gone out and would tell her when she came back. The little one was relieved. Qin Zhen finished speaking. Lu Dinkin said, I didn't do well in the Qi family, and the family broke up, which made everyone laugh. Just when everyone didn't know how to answer the question, a servant came in and said, Your Majesty, Dr. Su and Dr. Hu have finished examining the old lady. The British Duke and Lu Dinkin stood up and greeted Dr. Su and Dr. Hu as they entered. Dr. Su and Dr. Hu bowed their hands to everyone. The British Duke invited the two of them to sit down. Physician Su waved his hand and said, I and Mr. Hu have something to do back at Tai's hospital, so I won't stay any longer. I will explain the old lady's injury to everyone. The old lady's injuries were extremely serious. The tendons of her hands and feet were severed, and her tongue was cut off at the root. From now on, even if the old lady's injuries are healed, it will be extremely difficult for her to take care of herself and she will no longer be able to speak. The people present took a breath after hearing Su Yizheng's words. It is difficult to think about an old man who cannot take care of himself. After a pause, Dr. Su continued, This is the old lady's injury. I and Mr. Hu have already treated the old lady's wound, prescribed prescriptions and prepared precautions. As he said that, Dr. Su was handing the prescription in his hand to the British Duke. The British Duke stretched out his hand to take the prescription and bowed to express his thanks. Physician Su leaned forward and said, Your Majesty, you are very polite. I hope that the old lady will recover soon. I and Mr. Hu will not disturb everyone's discussion, and we will take our leave. Lu Xiren leaned forward and said, Thank you for your hard work, I'll give you a farewell. Su Yizheng declined politely. The British Duke said, I ask Xiren to send you two off. Thank you for your hard work. Physician Su saw Lu Xiren insisting on seeing him off, and without further words, he cupped his hands and left the room. Concubine picked up the cup on the table, banged it heavily, and said angrily, I have asked Mr. Lu and Zhang Shangshu to investigate the case as soon as possible and find out the real culprit. I request that the criminal be punished with a lighter punishment. Zhang Shangshu and Lu Fuyan leaned forward and responded, I will do my best to find out the dispute as soon as possible. Concubine looked at King Qin and said fiercely, Once the person behind the scenes is found out, no matter who the person is, I will make him pay the price with blood and make him regret it. King Qin looked at Concubine and said, Concubine, you don't have to look at me fiercely. I also hope that the Ministry of Punishment and Jingzhou Mansion will bring the gangsters to justice as soon as possible. Give Grandma Wang and the old lady an explanation. King Xian looked at King Qin coldly and said, Brother, the Emperor is coming over today to visit my grandmother. The King of Qin turned to meet the Xian Wang's gaze and asked bluntly, What else? Could it be that the Xian King is as suspicious of me as Zigzun? The wise king said, until the truth is found out, everything is an object of suspicion. It is not impossible for me to be suspicious of the emperor's brother. After all, the way my grandmother treated the emperor's brother before has made the emperor's brother hold a grudge. King Qin looked at the Xian King with a half smile, and said calmly, "The Xian King is right. Before the truth comes out, anyone can be suspected. But you can't wrongly accuse any innocent person, right? Therefore, everything must have evidence, witnesses, and physical evidence, and the case should not be decided based on the imagination of the wise king, Lu Zixun, and others. I believe that all the adults in the Jingzhou mansion and the Ministry of Punishment are experienced experts in solving cases. With their full efforts to pursue the case, the truth will come to light one day. The reason why I appear here today is, firstly, that I am now serving in the Ministry of Punishment, and secondly, the British Palace was once my home. If something happened at home, I should come back and take a look, whether in public or private. I have forgotten that it is precisely because of this relationship between me and the British government that I should avoid suspicion." The wise king sneered, "Brother Wang's speech has been impeccable since he was a child." King Qin smiled and said, thank you, thank you. I am only telling the truth, the truth. Again, you can doubt anyone, but you have to have evidence." The wise king snorted coldly and stopped talking. The British Duke said, "The investigation of the case will be left to the Jingzhou mansion and the Ministry of Punishment. The two princes do not need to fight over this to hurt their harmony." King Qin said, "I originally wanted to visit the old lady, but under the current situation, it seems that it is not necessary. Although I serve in the Ministry of Punishment, considering the special nature of this case, I would like to avoid suspicion. I will leave here." Having said that, King Qin stood up and bowed his hands to Zhang Shangshu, Zheng Shilang, and Lu Fuyan. Zhang Shangshu stood up and cupped his hands and said, "That's fine. Your Majesty, please go back first. We'll see you later." King Qin nodded and walked out. After taking 2 steps, King Qin turned back to look at the Xian King and said, "If I were the one who took action, do you think the old lady would still be alive?" King Qin's words were not loud, but the people in the room could hear him clearly. The wise king's expression was stagnant, and he could not say a word as he met King Qin's gaze. Indeed, if King Qin takes action, there is no need for him to spare his grandmother's life. King Qin looked at him with contempt, turned and left. Concubinda was so angry that she was shaking all over and murmured, "He is really lawless. How dare he? I want to go back to the palace to see the emperor and let the emperor comment." The King Xian turned back to look at Concubinda and said, "Concubine, please be patient. The emperor is right. This matter should not be caused by the emperor." Seeing that the wise king was protecting the king of Qin, Concubinda lost control of her emotions again. "You believe what he says? You have been protecting him for so many years, but what about him? How did he treat you?" It seems that in Concubinda's heart, King Qin is just a white-eyed wolf. The British public was worried that the concubine would make surprise remarks. "You should know that there are outsiders present at this moment." He quickly said, "We will not make unnecessary speculations. Leave everything to the Ministry of Justice and Jingzhou Mansion, and we will be patient and get the results. Mr. Zhang and Mr. Lu, please worry about it." Zhang Shangshu bowed his hands and said, "The Duke of the country has spoken seriously. It is my duty to investigate the case, so there is no need to worry about it." The King Xian looked at Concubinda and said, "Grandma's condition is serious and she needs to rest. My concubine has been out of the palace for a long time, so let's go back to the palace first. When Grandma gets better, she will come to visit her again." "Okay." Concubinda thought for a while and nodded, "That's good. I'll come see the old lady when she gets better. I'd like to thank everyone here for the case." As Concubinda stood up, Zhang Shangshu and others stood up and sent Concubinda out of Rongan Hall. Concubine stopped and said, "My lords, it is important to handle the case, so please send it here." Zhang Shangshu and others stopped and bowed to Concubine, until Concubine walked away. The British Duke and the Xian Wang sent Concubine into the car, and they went to the study room of Wen Yuan Pavilion. As soon as he entered the study, the British Duke said, "If this was not done by King Qin, who could it be? Could it be him?" End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the Lucky Girl from a Farm Family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 315. Chapter 315 Suspicion 2. The wise king thought that the British Duke thought the same thing as him, and asked, "Who?" The British Duke said, "Yeshan. Or Qin Yu." From the British Duke's perspective, Yeshan had a grudge against the Yang family. Now that she had left the British Duke's residence, she was looking for an opportunity to take revenge and come back. The Xian Wang thought for a while, shook his head and said, "Probably not. My aunt and uncle have reconciled. She has gotten rid of her grandmother, so there is no need to do such a thing again. As for Mrs. Jean, it is even more unreasonable. If Mrs. Jean wanted to deal with her grandmother, she would have taken action long ago and would not wait until this time. I think their motives are insufficient, and it's hard for women to be cruel. I feel that my uncle is more likely to do this." As soon as his uncle returned to Beijing, Mr. Ye asked him to reconcile, and his uncle agreed. With his uncle's temperament, if he hadn't been provoked by something, he would never agree to divorce. The British Duke stroked his beard and thought for a moment, then nodded and said, "Your Majesty's analysis is reasonable. Ding Kunji respects the Ye family and will not easily agree to divorce. However, Dinkin has always been gentle towards others, how could he be so cruel?" The wise king picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea. He disagreed with the British Duke's statement. A general who commanded thousands of troops and fought on the battlefield was gentle to others. Even if my uncle is gentle to others, the rabbit will bite when he gets angry, and his grandmother will break up his family, but he will let others bully him without fighting back. From my perspective, if my grandmother hadn't died and my uncle had to be filial to Ding Yu, how could my grandmother still be alive? The British Duke was silent. He had already known the answer in his heart. Even if Yang was not Lu Dinkin's biological mother, she was still his nominal mother. Matricide was a heinous crime. The wise king continued, "However, think about what my grandmother did. If someone were cruel, he would have attacked her long ago. Why would he wait until today?" The British Duke sighed, having said that, "This is a serious crime of treason. How dare he Dinkin?" The wise king said disapprovingly, "A general who commands thousands of troops and has many capable people under his command will naturally not let anyone find any clues when doing this. Besides, my grandmother is not my uncle's biological mother. There is no such thing as treachery in my uncle's heart." The British Duke sighed slightly and said, "If this is really the case, if something like this happens, it will be a misfortune for the family." The wise king consoled him, "Among our big families, who has no trouble? The Duke of the country wants to be more liberal. We should think carefully about how to turn bad things into things that are good for us." The British Duke nodded, "Yes, Zigzun did a good job in today's matter. I will go back and take care of him later." The wise king nodded, "Yes, I know it well. This matter." King Qin came out of the British government, and Ruan Chu asked, "Is the prince still returned to Yamen?" King Qin shook his head and said, "I'm not going, I'm going back to the palace." After saying that, King Qin got on the chariot, Rugjuan drove the chariot, and Ruan Chu rode beside him. Back to the palace, King Qin asked, "Has the princess come to the palace?" The servant leaned forward and said, "Go back to your lord, the princess has come over. She is currently in Sheahua Pavilion." After hearing this, King Qin quickly walked to Sheahua Pavilion. La Shun received the letter from King Qin returning to the palace and hurried out to welcome him. At the door, he met King Qin with raised eyebrows and brisk steps. Before he could greet him, King Qin asked, "Where is Xiao? Where are you now?" Lai Shun leaned forward and said, "Go back to your lord, the princess is in the kitchen right now." King Qin asked as he walked inside, "Has Xiao taken a rest at noon?" Back to the princess did not take a lunch break and went to the kitchen after lunch. King Qin nodded, "I know." The king of Qin entered the house, washed his hands and face, changed into his home robe, and then turned to go to the kitchen. When Shi Niang saw King Qin coming, she was about to greet him, but King Qin stopped her. King Qin signaled Shi Niang to be silent. Shi Niang nodded understandingly and left with Lonisara quietly. Gu Huayu said while cutting the ginger, "Shi Niang, you said you should have told me earlier that you took off your shoes to look for the prince." "I told you already." King Qin walked up behind Gu Huayu, put his arms around her, and asked in a low voice, "Are you so sure that I am the person Shi Niang is looking for?" Gu Huayu's hands froze, stopped what she was doing, looked up at King Qin, and asked with a smile, "Of course, there are not many people with 7-star moles in the world. When did you come back?" King Qin lowered his head and kissed Gu Huayu's forehead. "I just came back. Didn't I tell you to take a lunch break first and we can do it together when I come back?" Gu Huayu asked, "Are you sure you can do it?" King Qin smiled and said truthfully, "No, but I can give you a hand. If it doesn't work, I will talk to you on the side. As long as I am with you and look at you, I will be happy." Gu Huayu put the chopped into a plate. "Okay, can you make a fire?" King Qin walked to the fire hall and sat down. "I've never given birth before. I'll give it a try. It shouldn't be difficult." "Then let me teach you first." Gu Huayu walked over and squatted next to King Qin. She reached out and grabbed a handful of flammable wood flowers in her hand, lit it with a fire stick to start the fire, and then put the firewood in one by one. The firewood should be set up, leaving some space, and not being packed too tightly. The burning process of firewood requires enough oxygen. If there is space and enough oxygen, the fire will be strong. King Qin looked sideways at Gu Huayu and asked, "Xiao, what is oxygen?" Gu Huayu wanted to bite off her tongue. "Just make a fire and light a fire." She said something about oxygen. "What? I used to help my grandma make fires when I was a child, and I picked it up casually based on my experience." King Qin showed no doubts and nodded in agreement. "Give it to me, I'll do it." Gu Huayu handed the tongs to King Qin, got up and went to wash the pot and prepare for cooking. King Qin half stood up, looked at Gu Huayu, and asked, "Xiao, what are you burning?" Gu Huayu stretched out her hand and tried it. She felt that the pot was hot. She poured the marinated duck meat into it and stir-fried it while saying, "Ginger fried duck." King Qin sent 2 pieces of firewood to the fire hall, stood up straight and watched Gu Huayu skillfully pick up the fried duck meat that had changed color. Quickly washed the pot, and when it was hot, Gu Huayu poured oil into the pot, put down rock sugar and Sichuan peppercorns. The rock sugar turned into sugar color, added garlic slices, then poured in duck meat and stir-fried, added rice wine, and then added homemade doubanjiang. "Qinjian, change to small fire." King Qin responded, "Okay." After saying that, he took out the firewood from the fire hall. "Xiao often cooks at home?" King Qin asked. Gu Huayu shook her head. "With grandma, eldest uncle and second uncle here, I basically don't have the chance to cook, but after watching it too much, I will naturally be able to do it." The duck was simmering in the big pot. Gu Huayu opened the lid of the casserole on the small stove, and the rich aroma of chicken soup came out. "Chicken soup, it smells so good." King Qin walked over and asked. Gu Huayu nodded and added salt to the pot as she said, "Yes, stewed chicken soup." Then he tasted it and felt it was enough. He picked up the casserole, put the small pot on the fire, and started frying the tofu. King Qin looked at the tofu in the pot and asked, "What is this?" "Tofu with eggs, egg tofu." King Qin said, "No wonder it is yellow, it looks delicious." Gu Huayu said, "It's not bad. I like this dish." Fry the tofu until both sides are brown, add shrimp, some diced peppers, minced green onion, cook it, and it becomes a shrimp and tofu stew. It's soft and delicious. I feel good listening to you. Gu Huayu finished frying the tofu and started frying the shrimps. Then she added the prepared sauce, covered it and simmered. Cook it for a while and wait until the flavor is absorbed. After saying that, Gu Huayu turned around and opened the pot on the other stove, opened the lid and took out the mandarin fish from the pot, poured the homemade sauce on it, and put the sliced ginger, green onions and peppers on top of the fish. Then heat the oil in a small pot and bring the boiling hot oil to the boil. Beautiful, the colors match so beautifully King Qin couldn't help but admire. Gu Huayu smiled, accepted King Qin's praise, turned around and started cooking the tofu. "Hand the chopsticks to King Qin, have a taste." King Qin took the chopsticks and picked up a small piece of tofu. Just as he was about to put it into his mouth, Gu Huayu reminded, "Qinjian, blow it first, be careful not to burn it." The king of Qin quickly blew it and put it into his mouth. Gu Huayu looked at King Qin eagerly and asked, "How is it?" King Qin was amazed by the delicious and soft tofu. He gave Gu Huayu a thumbs up, "It's so delicious. I swear, this is the most delicious dish I have ever eaten. It's really, no exaggeration." Gu Huayu's face showed a bit of pride. She turned around and opened the lid of the big pot, stir-fried with a spatula, and said to King Qin, "Qinjian, big fire." "Okay, come on." King Qin put down his chopsticks and walked over to add firewood to the fire hall. Gu Huayu put the slices and chili shreds into the pot and stir-fried, then added the prepared sauce, wait until the flavor is absorbed, and put it on a plate. After washing the pot, add oil and blanch the prepared cabbage. "Okay, An Aling." The king of Qin took out the firewood. Gu Huayu said while washing her hands, "Get ready to eat." The king of Qin nodded and called out to the door, "Come here, set the food." La Shun came in with the waiters, and those who took the bowls, chopsticks and dishes were all busy. King Qin took Gu Huayu's hand and went to the dining room. On the way, he met Ruan Chu who was returning from checking the post. Ruan Chu bowed to the two of them. Gu Huayu warmly invited, "General Ruan hasn't eaten yet? Come and eat together." Ruan Chu quickly shook his head, "How can I disturb the wonderful time that the prince and the princess are getting together? I won't go." "What if the princess cooks a lot of food? Give some to me, I will be very grateful." Gu Huayu was just about to say that everyone should eat together. What she was cooking today was whole chickens and whole ducks. There were so many dishes that she and King Qin couldn't finish. King Qin was the first to say, "For the sake of General Ruan's taste, I will give you some vegetables." Ruan Chu bowed and thanked, "Thank you very much, Your Majesty." King Qin led Gu Huayu forward. Gu Huayu turned her head and looked at King Qin and said, "Wouldn't it be more lively if we all eat together?" King Qin squeezed her hand and whispered, "He will feel uncomfortable." Gu Huayu understood instantly and her face turned a little red. He said softly, "Should we be more restrained in front of others?" King Qin held Gu Huayu's hand tightly and said, "No, you are the one who is at the top of my heart. They are the ones who serve me closely. They know that you are very important to me, so there is no need to avoid them." Gu Huayu smiled and said no more. They went to the dining room and took their seats. King Qin first filled half a bowl of chicken soup for Gu Huayu and said, "Thank you for your hard work. Let's drink some soup first." Gu Huayu took the bowl and said, "Okay, you can drink it too and see what you think." King Qin nodded, filled himself half a bowl and drank it with his head down. Gu Huayu stared at King Qin and saw that he had taken a small sip first. Her eyes suddenly lit up and she looked up at her. Xiao, this soup is very delicious. The corners of Gu Huayu's mouth turned up, as long as you like it. After King Qin drank the chicken soup, Gu Huayu gave King Qin a chopstick of fish meat and said, "Here, let's try the fish meat." Okay, King Qin buried his head in eating. The fish was very tender and fresh. King Qin finished the bowl and picked up another chopstick. "Xiao, this fish is delicious. It doesn't have any fishy smell. The meat is tender. I'm very happy like." Gu Huayu nodded, "As long as you like it, eat more." The king of Qin ate several mouthfuls of fish before eating duck meat. He took a bite and said it was delicious. "Xiao, I will eat enough today." Gu Huayu smiled but said nothing. At the end of the meal, as King Qin said, he was full. The king of Qin was usually very self-disciplined and would only eat 8-cent full meals. Today he couldn't stop eating. Gu Huayu put away his chopsticks and took him for a walk in the yard to eat. Ruan Chu saw the two people coming out and asked, "Princess, can I give today's recipe to Chef Du?" Gu Huayu smiled, nodded, and said, "Okay, I'll teach Chef Du how to make it later." King Qin lowered his head and whispered to Gu Huayu, "I still want to eat what you cooked, and you can cook it for me in the future, okay?" Gu Huayu raised her head and looked at King Qin. King Qin asked, "Xiao, are you okay?" Gu Huayu realized that she had no resistance at all to the handsome and unique Prince of Qin. "Okay, let's do it for you." With a smile on his face, King Qin took Gu Huayu into his arms and said, "Xiao, you are so kind." Gu Huayu said softly, "Farewell. General Ruan is still here, calm down." The king of Qin did not let go and said softly, "Xian Yang is a gentleman and knows not to look at anything inappropriate." Gu Huayu secretly looked towards Ruan Chu, and sure enough, she saw Ruan Chu going to the other side with his back to them. Gu Huayu asked, "What's the situation in the British government? Is the old woman seriously injured?" King Qin let go of Gu Huayu, put his hand on her shoulder, and carried her forward for a walk. "My hand tendons and hamstrings were picked apart, and my tongue was cut out." Even though Gu Huayu was a doctor, hearing such injuries felt cruel. How much hatred must be caused to make her future life worse than death? Could it be the prince's doing? King Qin replied, "It may be, but there is no evidence." Concubine De and King Xian went to the father, and the father asked the Ministry of Punishment to cooperate with the Jingzhou mansion to jointly investigate. Gu Huayu said, "Did Concubine De and the people from the British government suspect you?" King Qin lowered his head and looked at Gu Huayu, nodded and said, "Yes, I just arrived at the British Duke's residence." Lu Zixun yelled at me like a mad dog, and Ziniang slapped him twice. Gu Huayu asked, "Qinjian, did you go to the British government house alone or with someone from the Ministry of Punishment?" "What's wrong with the people from the Ministry of Punishment?" King Qin asked. Gu Huayu said worriedly, "Lv Zixun yelled at you in front of everyone? Did he do it on purpose?" King Qin understood what Gu Huayu was worried about. He squeezed her shoulder gently and comforted her, "Don't worry, they just want to ruin my reputation. We are upright and not afraid of slanting shadows." End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Rebirth of Space, The Lucky Girl from a Farm Family. Author, He Would Fire Every. Chapter 316. Chapter 316 Tone. Gu Huayu said, "No, if they dare to use this matter to throw dirty water on you, I will never forgive them lightly. I am not willing to bully my people, and no one else can even think of bullying them." King Qin was pleased by the words "my people," a smile spread from the bottom of his heart, and he looked sideways at Gu Huayu and smiled. Gu Huayu was made uncomfortable by King Qin's laughter and asked, "What's wrong? Why are you laughing?" King Qin said, "It feels so good to be protected by someone." "Sir, the fourth master of Prime Minister Jiang's mansion would like to see you." Le Shun came over to report. King Qin raised his hand to look at his watch, frowned slightly, and said, "Why is he here? Where is he? Where is he?" Le Shun said, "It's already at the gate of the house." King Qin and Gu Huayu looked at each other. Gu Huayu spoke first, "Go and do your work. I should go back. Tomorrow I will go to Shi Mansion to add makeup to Yame. I won't go to the Yamen to look for you at noon. The day after tomorrow I'll look for you at the Yamen again at noon." "Okay, I'll send you off," King Qin said. Gu Huayu shook her head, "No, I'll go say goodbye to Shi Niang, and Shi Niang will just send me off." "Okay, remember to come find me the next day," King Qin confessed. Gu Huayu nodded in agreement. The king of Qin summoned a servant and asked him to take Gu Huayu to find Shi Niang. Watching Gu Huayu leave, King Qin turned and went to the gate. When he walked out of the gate, he saw Zhang Che and the young man Han Song talking together. "Huanzi." Zhang Che raised his head to look at King Qin, stepped forward and bowed to greet him. The king of Qin politely let Zhang Che into the palace and headed towards Sheahua Pavilion. Seeing Zhang Che in official uniform, he asked, "Did Huanzi just finish his official duties?" Zhang Che is now serving as the Dazi envoy of the Dazi division of the Ministry of Household Affairs. Zhang Che nodded, "Yes, I just happened to come here today to handle some official business. After finishing my errands, I came to see the prince." King Qin was as gentle as ever, and said with a smile, "We haven't seen each other for a while, and I'm still thinking of making an appointment to get together during the rest day." Zhang Che said, "Suddenly, it seems that everyone has become very busy. King Xian is busy with the wedding. Li Cheng went to the Ministry of Punishment and read all the files in one day. Wenda was busy with the affairs of the Long Shadow Guards. Qin Jian became the king of Qin, and even served in the Ministry of Punishment, so he seemed to have more free time." King Qin said, "Dazizi has a lot to do. Huanzi, please come here." The king of Qin let Zhang Che into the living room, and Le Shun came in, served tea and then left. King Qin said, "Huanzi is staying for dinner." Zhang Che took a sip of tea, put down the teacup, waved his hand and said, "I won't keep any dinner. I just came to see Qing, my lord. I'm sorry, I'm used to yelling, and I can't change it for a while." Huanzi has a good intention. "It doesn't matter, let's just call me Qing Yan as before," King Qin said with a smile. "The etiquette must not be messed up. The prince is the prince, how can you call him by his first name?" King Qin smiled and then asked, "We have a small friendship, so you really don't need to worry about these things. It would be more friendly to be casual. You said Wenda has been busy with the Dragon Shadow Guard recently?" Zhang Che leaned forward and said, "Yes, there seems to be some trouble in Longjingwei. This month, Gyu Pavilion has closed 6 branches, and many people under the sect have left Longjingwei and joined other families." King Qin felt something in his heart. Too many things happened recently, which made him ignore the matter of Long Shadow Guard. "No wonder, I saw Wenda looking worried at the British government residence this morning. It turned out that something happened to Longjingwei." Speaking of the British government, Zhang Che asked about Mrs. Yang's situation seemingly casually. The king of Qin briefly explained the situation of Mrs. Yang. Zhang Che sighed, "If an accident like this happens to the old lady at her age, she will suffer a lot for the rest of her life." The king of Qin then sighed, "Who says it's not the case? It's hard to even think about it for an old man in his 60s or 70s who can't take care of himself." After the two chatted for a while, Zhang Che suddenly said, "There is something I want to ask the prince for advice." King Qin put down the teacup, looked at Zhang Che, and asked, "What's the matter? Huanzi, please tell me." Zhang Che said seriously, "That's right, my grandfather wants me to take a job abroad, so I'm a little hesitant." The king of Qin sat up straight and asked, "Wei Ren?" Zhang Che nodded, "Yes, my grandfather asked me to think about it and tell him when I make up my mind." King Qin asked, "What do you think?" Zhang Che spread his hands and said, "I'm a little hesitant, so I came to ask you for advice." Zhang Che was inherited and trained by the Zhang family and is the future head of the Zhang family. Zhang Che came to ask him for advice on matters related to Zhang Che's future and even the rise and fall of the Zhang family. The king of Qin did not think it was just Zhang Che's intention. There should be Prime Minister Jiang's instruction here. King Qin thought for a moment and asked, "Huanzi, since you come to ask me for advice, you trust me?" Zhang Che nodded, "Yes, that's why I came to find the prince." King Qin leaned towards Zhang Che and asked bluntly, "Xiang Zhang asked you to take a foreign post. In addition to training you, he also wants you to avoid party disputes, right?" Zhang Che nodded and said truthfully, "Yes, these days, the king and the British Duke have approached my grandfather many times to discuss matters, just because I am close to the wise king. But the reason why I am close to the Xian Wang is not because of you, the prince. I am on good terms with the prince and only then I am on good terms with the Xian king. Grandpa asked me to stay away mainly for this reason. Anyang and my grandmother are worried about my lifelong affairs, and the prince also knows that I have not yet discussed my marriage." Zhang Che's meaning is already obvious. Prime Minister Zhang does not side with the wise king. What does Zhang Xiang mean? Why let Zhang Che tell him this? Is it to show kindness to yourself? Or is there another purpose? Or to explore your own attitude? King Qin thought for a while and said, "Xiang Zhang has gone from magistrate to prime minister step by step. He has a rich life experience. He must be doing it for your own good by asking you to take up the post. Going out to gain experience is indeed beneficial to you. However, lifelong events are also important. I think you can discuss the marriage first, and then take a job abroad after the wedding." Zhang Che said, "However, it will take at least 2 or 3 years from negotiation to wedding." King Qin smiled and said, "A life is very long. 3 or 2 years is just a blink of an eye. As for other things, don't worry about it. Just do what you are doing." Zhang Che stood up and cupped his hands towards King Qin, "Thank you Qinjian, no, thank you Lord. I understand. It's getting late, so I'll say goodbye." King Qin smiled and did not hold back. He stood up and said, "I'll see you off." The king of Qin sent Zhang Che to the door, and waited until Zhang Che had gone far before turning back and going back to the house. He entered the study and sat behind the desk, thinking deeply. The king of Qin can be sure that Zhang Xi's visit today was definitely not by chance. He and Zhang Si have known each other for more than 10 years, and the two can be considered close confidants. As Zhang Che said, it was because of him that Zhang Che got close to the wise king. As for party struggles, haven't the Zhang family always taken sides? Why did Prime Minister Zhang let Zhang Si come to test his reputation? King Qin thought for a long time until Le Shun came in and lit the lamp. Zhang Che returned to the house and asked his servants, "Is grandfather back?" The servant replied respectfully, "Go back to fourth master, the prime minister is in the study room of Sangzitang." Zhang Che walked up to Sangzi Hall. After waiting for the servants to inform him, he entered the house to pay homage to his grandfather. Zhang Xiang put down the book in his hand and pointed to the chair opposite, "Sit." After Zhang Che thanked him, he walked over and sat down. He reached out and picked up the purple clay pot in front of Prime Minister Zhang, held the spout in his mouth and drank directly. Zhang Xiang stared at the purple clay pot and said, "Hey, leave some for me. This is the old white tea, the last one." Zhang Che took a few sips before stopping. He also shook the pot and placed it in front of Prime Minister Zhang. "Grandpa, don't worry, There's still half a pot left. Prime Minister Zhang picked up the purple sand, shook it, and said sadly, "You don't understand tea, you drink tea like a cow, and you waste this old white tea in vain." Zhang Che looked at Zhang Xiang and giggled, then reached out to pick up the purple clay pot again. Grandpa was wrong. How can there be such an elegant cow drink? Cows are like this. My grandson will teach you how to drink. Zhang Xiang hid the purple clay pot behind his back and cursed with a smile, "You brat, put your hands away. Fang Xian, bring a big vat of water to the brat." Zhang Xiang smiled and shouted to Fang Xian outside the door. Fang Xian is an old man who serves Zhang Xiang and has been with Zhang Xiang for decades. He was not surprised by the joking between the grandfather and grandson, so he raised his voice and replied, "Master Xiang, fourth master, please give me a sip of this old white tea. Please reward him with 2 sips. Zhang Xiang said, "What can we do? Old white tea has a strong stamina, and I am afraid that he will get drunk after drinking too much." Zhang Che said quickly, "Grandpa is worrying too much. My grandson promises not to get drunk. If you don't believe me, just give your grandson a few more sips." "I believe you, you have just joined the government, you came to my place without changing your official uniform. Is there something wrong?" Zhang Xiang was worried that Zhang Che was staring at his old white tea, so he quickly changed the subject. Seeing his grandfather asking about business, Zhang Che stopped laughing and said seriously, "Yes, my grandson went to the Bama mountain area to do some business today, and he stopped by the Prince of Qin's mansion to do something good." Hearing Zhang Che say that he had gone to Prince Qin's mansion, Minister Jiang's smile faded. He sat up straight and said, "How is it? Have you met Prince Qin?" Zhang Che nodded and replied, "See you, tell the king of Qin the matter." Zhang Xiang asked, "According to what I taught you?" Zhang Che said, "I didn't follow what my grandfather said, but that's what I meant." Zhang Xiang moved the chair and asked him to lean forward. He placed his hands on the table with his hands clasped, staring at Zhang Che. "Tell me quickly, how did King Qin return?" Zhang Che roughly recounted his conversation with King Qin. After hearing this, Zhang Xiang pondered for a moment, nodded and said, "Then do as King Qin said and concentrate on your current position. Let your mother-in-law and grandmother negotiate the marriage for you." Zhang Che looked at Prime Minister Zhang and asked, "Grandpa, are we going to side with the king of Qin, right? Doesn't our family's ancestral motto prohibit our descendants from participating in party struggles?" Zhang Xiang picked up the purple clay pot and took a sip of tea, and said, "Yes, the teachings of our ancestors tell us to only be loyal to those in high positions. But whoever the people in high positions favor, we have to pay attention to." "Grandpa, what do you mean? The emperor favors King Qin, but King Qin just recognized his ancestor and returned to the clan. How did grandfather figure it out?" Zhang Che asked. Zhang Che looked at his grandfather eagerly. He wanted to get the truth from his grandfather's mouth. He has been friends with Qin Jian since he was a child. Qin Jian became a prince, and he was happy for him from the bottom of his heart. If Qin Jian can compete for a big position, he will follow him and go through fire and water for Qin Jian. If Qin Jian has no intention of becoming a powerful person, he can be his best friend as before. Zhang Xiang thought for a while and said, "When King Qin was Lulu, the emperor was partial to him. At that time, I still couldn't figure it out. Now, the truth has been revealed, and King Qin has recognized his ancestor and returned to his clan, and I suddenly realized it. In my opinion, the emperor might have known that Lulu was the eldest son of the emperor, so he would treat him so favorably. Otherwise, how to explain that the emperor asked Lulu to be the companion of the wise king? Let him and the princes be taught by the great bachelors." Zhang Che was confused and asked, "Isn't Qin Jian the only one who is the reading companion? Isn't Li Cheng also the reading companion of King Qi?" Zhang Xiang shook his head, "How can this be compared? Li Cheng has only been a reading companion for a few days, and Li Cheng can only learn so much. The king of Qin served as a companion and stayed with the king Xian from beginning to end. All the studies that the king Xian attended were attended by the king of Qin. That's not all, the emperor will personally check on King Qin's homework. Zhang Che was shocked and said, "Is there still such a thing?" Zhang Xiang nodded. "Several times, when I entered the palace to meet the emperor, I encountered the emperor personally guiding Lulu. If Lulu was the emperor's nephew, how could the emperor treat him like this? The emperor also personally gave him a fish talisman. It's nothing to give a fish talisman personally, right? Didn't the emperor also give a fish talisman to Princess Yan Ran?" Zhang Che asked. Zhang Xiang smiled, raised his head and looked at Zhang Che, and said, "If it weren't for King Qin, would the emperor give the fish talisman to Princess Yan Ran?" "What does grandfather mean by this?" Zhang Xiang said, "How did the identity of Princess Yan Ran be revealed?" "It was King Qin who went to the emperor to report." "When did the emperor give Princess Yan Ran the fish talisman?" "It was the day someone assassinated King Qin." Looking at the connections, now do you understand it? Zhang Xiang looked at the speechless grandson, and then said, "Just wait and see, before long, the emperor will definitely grant a marriage to King Qin and Princess Yan Ran." Zhang Che didn't speak, only nodded slightly. Zhang Xiang said, "The king of Qin is right, the emperor is in the prime of the spring and autumn period, and the situation of the court will not change in a short time. You only need to concentrate on what you are doing, and don't think too much about anything else. Starting tomorrow, ask your mother-in-law and grandmother to discuss marriage for you. After the wedding, you can take your wife to work abroad for a few years." Zhang Che bowed and thanked him. "My grandson listens to his grandfather, but he depends on his arrangements." Zhang Xiang nodded with satisfaction. "Go, quickly change your clothes, and then go have dinner. I will wait for you in the dining room." Zhang Che bowed and said, "Okay." The next day, after breakfast, Gu Huayu, Mrs. Ping and Mrs. Wang went to Shi Mansion to add makeup to Shi Yame. The group arrived at Shi Mansion. When Gu Huayu got out of the car, she did not see Mrs. Ping. She only saw Yang Jing and her maid at the second door to greet them. Yang Jing smiled and greeted her, then walked in with Mrs. Ping on her arm. As she walked, Yang Jing explained to the three of them, "My mother originally wanted to come to greet my aunt in person, but just a quarter of an hour ago, Princess Jing'an and Princess Zaiwen came over to add makeup to the third sister. My mother couldn't leave for a while, so I had to let Jing'er come to greet my aunt. I asked my aunt to be considerate." Mrs. Ping smiled and replied, "Hospitality is important. We are a family and there is no need to be so polite." When Gu Huayu heard about Princess Jing'an, she suddenly thought of Wang Suimei. She was still thinking of waiting for a free day to meet the trouble-making princess, but she didn't expect to meet her today. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 317. Chapter 317 Hostility. Gu Huayu and her group followed Yang Jing to the living room. Gu Huayu looked at the upper woman, who had her hair in a high bun with a hollow orchid hairpin. She applied a little makeup on her face, and there was a bit of contempt in her almond-shaped eyes, which made her somewhat graceful face even more arrogant. Mrs. Ping stood up and came over to greet her. "Introduce Princess Jing'an and Princess Zaiwen to Mrs. Ping." After greeting each other and taking a seat, Princess Jinglian waved to Gu Huayu, "Yan Ran, come and sit next to me." Gu Huayu smiled and responded, "Okay." As she said that, Gu Huayu walked towards Princess Jinglian gracefully. Princess Jinglian and Princess Jing'an sit together at the top. To Princess Jing'an's left is Princess Jinglian, and to her right is Princess Zaiwen. Gu Huayu sat next to Princess Jinglian. Princess Jinglian leaned over and whispered, "Stay a little longer today. I have something to do with you." Gu Huayu nodded obediently, okay. Seeing the intimacy between Princess Jinglian and Gu Huayu, Princess Xiwen said deliberately, Sister Jinglian, I will hold a poetry meeting in the mansion on the first day of the Lunar New Year. You should be honored and come to sit in the mansion. After hearing Princess Xiwen's question, Princess Jinglian sat up straight and asked, is it the first day of the new year? Yes, the first day of the new year. Princess Jinglian replied apologetically, I'm sorry, I'm afraid I won't be able to go on the first day of the new year. On the first day of the Lunar New Year, the old lady gave a haircut ceremony to Yan Ran. Everyone in our family would go over to watch the ceremony that day. Next time, when you hold a poetry meeting, let me know in advance and I will definitely go and have a look. Princess Xiwen originally wanted to interact with Princess Jinglian and demonstrate to Gu Huayu. I didn't show my authority, but I was slapped in the face. Xiwen's expression instantly changed, and he was so embarrassed that he didn't know what to do. Seeing her daughter's face darken, Princess Jinglian calmly took over and said, is Yan Ran doing the hairpin ceremony on the first day of the new year? The eldest princess's words made Mrs. Wang a little embarrassed, and she was thinking about how to answer. He leaned forward and said, Princess, yes, Yan Ran's birthday was originally the first day of October. Due to something else, I postponed the haircut ceremony to the first day of the winter lunar month. I didn't expect that the poetry meeting at the eldest princess's house would conflict. I'm really sorry. Mrs. Wang's words were extremely polite and her attitude was respectful. Princess Jinglian said, Madam, there is no need to apologize. Getting hairpins is a great gift. The poetry festival can be held at any time. On the first day of the Lunar New Year, we will come over to join in the fun and enjoy Yan Ran's blessing. At this point in what the eldest princess said, it would be a bit disrespectful if she didn't say any more invitations. Mrs. Ping leaned forward and said, it is Yan Ran's blessing that the princess can come here. I would like to thank the eldest princess for her kindness. Princess Xiwen did not expect that her mother would go to watch the ceremony, and she was quite dissatisfied. Of course, although Princess Xiwen was dissatisfied, she did not dare to lose her temper in public with the matter decided by Princess Jinglian. At this moment, Gu Huayu took a serious look at this princess who looked arrogant from head to toe. The lotus silk peep-breasted blouse and the five-color brocade plait and gold-embroidered silk skirt, with her skin as smooth as fat and her exquisite facial features, can be regarded as a beauty of the generation. If her face were less arrogant, it would add a lot of beauty to her. Gu Huayu saw that Su Xiwen's face was as dark as constipation, and gave her a cold look from afar. Gu Huayu was a little bit dumbfounded. It was neither that she refused to let her hold a poetry meeting, nor that she invited her to watch her haircut ceremony. This account should not be placed on her no matter what, right? Princess Jinglian leaned towards Gu Huayu and whispered, ignore her. Gu Huayu withdrew her gaze and stretched out her hand to pick up the teacup on the table. What did Sister Jinglian say to Yan Ran? Gu Huayu stopped holding the cup and looked up at Su Xiwen, sensing Su Xiwen's hostility towards her from her angry face. Gu Huayu was a little confused by the hostility. She didn't want Jinglian to be angered, so she raised the cup in her hand and said, Princess, let me try this tea, good melon slices, I like the taste. Gu Huayu's explanation stimulated Su Xiwen, why are you drinking melon slices too? Su Xiwen's tone was as if Gu Huayu's drinking of melon slices was a grave sin. Gu Huayu raised her eyebrows and said calmly, yes, I like to drink melon slices, and everyone close to me knows it. What? Princess Xiwen also drinks melon slices. Seeing that her daughter was losing her temper, Princess Jinglian took over with a smile, yes, Xiwen also likes to drink melon slices. I didn't expect Yan Ran and Xiwen to have the same hobbies. Now that you have something to talk about, you can play together more in the future. As she spoke, Princess Jinglian gave Su Xiwen a warning look, not allowing her to do it again. Gu Huayu smiled and leaned forward and said, "It's quite a fate." "Thank you, eldest princess." The servant came in and said, "Madam, Mrs. Shen and Mrs. Zhang from Privy Wang's residence came over to add makeup to the young lady." Mrs. Ping leaned towards the eldest princess of Qing'an and said, "Elder princess, please sit down while I wait for my wife to greet the guests." "Princess, let's talk to the eldest princess." Princess Qing'an said, "You're welcome, Yingzi, go and get busy." The eldest princess of Qing'an chose to go to Shi's mansion today to add makeup, that is, people who spied on Wang's mansion would come to Shi's mansion today, especially to meet Mrs. Shen from Wang's mansion. After Mrs. Ping left, Princess Qing'an whispered to Zaiwen, "You need to remember the purpose of our trip." Gu Huayu seemed to be drinking tea carelessly, but her attention was on Princess Qing'an and her daughter. Although her hearing is not as good as before, she can still hear things clearly at such a close distance. The purpose of this trip? Isn't the purpose of their trip to add makeup? Is adding makeup just a pretense? The room was silent for a moment, and Princess Qing'an turned to talk to Mrs. Ping about household matters. Princess Jinglian had never had a good impression of the eldest princess who acted according to the circumstances, so she allowed her to speak and ignored her. Instead, he whispered to Gu Huayu and said, Privy Wang's wife Shen and Wanfu's Shen are cousins. The Shen family of Wanfu dared to bully the old lady because of this person who was supporting the Shen family. If Mrs. Shen makes fun of the old lady later, you don't have to give her face. Thank you, princess, I understand. After a while, Mrs. Ping led Mrs. Shen and Mrs. Zhang in. There are two princesses at the top. The visitor first greets the two princesses, and then greets everyone present one by one. Mrs. Shen has not seen Mrs. Ping for a long time, and she did not expect to meet her here today. He smiled and said, I haven't seen my old sister for a long time. I went to Wanfu a few days ago and heard that my old sister moved out of Wanfu. Where does my old sister live now? My eyesight is not very good. I am still used to living outside. The words that seem to be concerned are actually heartbreaking. No one present is stupid. Who can't hear Shen's ridicule? The room fell silent for a moment. Before Mrs. Ping could reply, Gu Huayu said first, Thank you, Mrs. Shen, for your concern. My grandmother is living with me now. We are currently living in a house on Wutong Lane. The house is not big, it only has 3 rooms, which makes my grandmother feel a little wronged. But fortunately, the princess mansion rewarded by the emperor has been completed. In a few days, we will move to the princess's mansion on Yongchun Road. Also, Mr. Shen is not very familiar with my grandmother. My grandmother's eye disease has recovered, as everyone who is close to us knows. By the way, my grandma embroidered a purse for me 2 days ago, and I still have it with me today. Just this, a gentle and soothing peony flower, isn't it beautiful? As Gu Huayu spoke, she took out her purse and held it in her hand to show it to everyone. Princess Jinglian took it and looked at it carefully for a while, and praised, the old lady's craftsmanship is amazing, the embroidery is meticulous, the colors are elegant, and the flowers are brought to life by your embroidery. Is this the Su embroidery method used? Mrs. Ping smiled and said, Princess has good eyesight, and it is the Su embroidery method. I haven't embroidered for many years, and my hands are raw and not as good as before. I am not very satisfied with this. I originally wanted to embroider it again another day, but Yan Ran insisted on bringing it out and showing off her shame. Mrs. Shen's old face was extremely embarrassed. She smiled and found a step for herself. Sister, I am so lucky when I grow old, I will enjoy the blessing of a granddaughter. At the Shi mansion, Mrs. Ping didn't want to disturb the good things of the Shi family with others, so she smiled and said, Thank you. Thanks to my sister's good advice, I am blessed by Yan Ran. Please take a seat, sister. Princess Zaiwen stood up and offered her seat, Old lady, sit here. Mrs. Shen said hurriedly, Princess, please sit down. I can sit here, old lady. Princess Jing'an said, Xiwen is a junior, so he should give up his seat. Madam, please take a seat. Seeing that the eldest princess had spoken, Mrs. Shen no longer refused and sat on Su Xiwen's seat. Then let's have tea and talk about family affairs. Princess Jinglian turned her head and asked in a low voice, Yan Ran, are you good at Kanjin prescription? Gu Huayu raised her head to look at Princess Jinglian, lowered her voice and asked, who is watching? Princess yourself. Princess Jinglian nodded, yes. Gu Huayu asked, what's wrong? Irregular menstruation or something else? Menstruation always takes 7 or 8 days to complete. I have been married for several years and I really want to have a child, but I have never been able to do so. I asked the imperial doctor in the palace to diagnose me and took several prescriptions, but it didn't work. Gu Huayu said, it's hard to feel the pulse here, let's take a step and talk. Princess Jinglian nodded and said, okay, you come with me. Princess Jinglian stood up, took Gu Huayu's hand and walked out. She said to Mrs. Ping, Mother, Yan Ran and I will leave for a while. Mrs. Ping just thought they were going to show respect and nodded, go ahead. Princess Jinglian took Gu Huayu to her courtyard, leaving only Fangxing, the maid who was waiting closely, by her side. After taking Princess Jinglian's pulse, Gu Huayu asked, Princess, did you suffer from colds when you were a child? When menstruation comes, your stomach will have a dull pain, the blood will be dark red, and there will be lumps. Every menstruation will be ticking for several days. Jinglian's eyes were shining, and she nodded repeatedly, yes, yes, that's it. Yan Ran, am I sick? Can it be cured? Can I have a child? Gu Huayu said, the palace cold is a bit serious, but it can be cured. My eldest sister was much more severe than you before, but she has recovered. This year, she gained a big fat boy. Really? What do I need to do? Princess Jinglian asked anxiously. Gu Huayu said confidently, Princess, don't worry, I will give you a recipe later, and you will be fine after a while. Princess Jinglian stood up and bowed deeply to Gu Huayu, Yan Ran, thank you, you are my great benefactor. If you are of any use to me in the future, just ask. Family, why are you so polite? Let's go. It's not good to be away for too long. Let's go back, Gu Huayu said with a smile. Gu Huayu and Princess Jinglian returned to the living room together. Princess Xiwen glanced at her coldly. Gu Huayu didn't know why this person was hostile to her. Auntie, try this golden cake roll, it was sent here by someone sent by my concubine. Gu Huayu reached out and took a piece with a fork and put it in her mouth. Princess Jinglian asked, how is it? Do you like it? Gu Huayu nodded, swallowed the food in her mouth, and replied, not bad, very soft, sweet but not greasy. Then eat more. Princess Jinglian handed the plate to Gu Huayu's hand. Gu Huayu took the plate, lowered her head and started eating. If that child Swame was half as sensible as that child Zelian, neither government would have reached this stage. Thank you to the eldest princess for your understanding. The eldest princess also knows that Xingyi will be the head of the house in the future, and his daughter-in-law will be his good wife, helping him take care of everything in the house. I really admire the second wife of Marquis Yong'an. I will discuss it with our old man later and see what the plan is for Xingyi. Although marriage is the order of parents, we are also an enlightened family and cannot ignore the feelings of our children. I hope the eldest princess can understand that if we can renew our fate, I am very willing to marry the Su family. Hearing this, Gu Huayu looked up and saw Princess Jing'an smiling and nodding, okay, I'm waiting for the good news from the old lady. I have watched this child Xingyi grow up, and the prince and the old lady in the palace like him very much. If this marriage can come true, it will be regarded as fulfilling the wishes of the two elders. Mrs. Shen said with a smile, it is his good fortune that Xingyi can be appreciated by the eldest princess. I will reply to Lord Chang'an as soon as possible. Gu Huayu's brows knitted when she heard this. Are all the men in the world dead? The Marquis of Yong'an wants to curry favor with the family who aborts his granddaughter's marriage. The conversation between Princess Jing'an and Mrs. Shen refreshed Gu Huayu's understanding. After lunch at Shi Mansion, Gu Huayu left Shi Mansion with Mrs. Ping and Mrs. Wang. After leaving Shi Mansion, Gu Huayu said, Grandma, Aunt, it's still early, let's go to Yongchun Road first to see what else needs to be purchased. Mrs. Ping nodded and said, okay, let's go. Gu Huayu said to King Yu, go to the old house on Yongchun Road. Mrs. Ping's eyes suddenly turned red when she looked at the Hua mansion that had been built according to its original appearance. Mrs. Wang advised, Auntie, don't cry. We should be happy. Han Ru will feel relieved after seeing her. Mrs. Ping wiped the corners of her eyes and nodded, you are right, you should be happy. Gu Huayu accompanied Mrs. Ping. After Mrs. Wang walked around for a while, she said, Grandma, how about we move here on the 10th day of the lunar month? Mrs. Ping thought for a while and said, okay, the 10th day of the lunar month is the death anniversary of your father and mother. Let's move here on the 10th day of the lunar month to worship them. Mrs. Wang asked, do we have to entertain guests during the housewarming? If we entertain guests, isn't time a bit tight? Gu Huayu said, please, it's not a big deal, just ask people close to you to release the letter. Let the enemies know. Mrs. Ping understood what Gu Huayu meant and asked with some worry, Yan Ran, are you ready? Gu Huayu nodded, Grandma, don't worry, everything is ready. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 318. Chapter 318 Tacit Understanding. After leaving Huafu, Mrs. Ping and Mrs. Wang returned to Wutong Lane first. Gu Huayu took Lonisara to King Grand Pavilion, prepared medicine for Princess Jinglian, prepared precautions and asked King Yu to deliver it to the princess's residence. Princess, you wait here for me. I will deliver the medicine to the princess's house and come back to pick you up. Gu Huayu said, no, you sent the medicine and went directly back to Wutong Alley. This is not far from Wutong Alley. Lonisara and I walked back. After King Yu left, Gu Huayu played with Gu's Hijhe, Gu's Hija and Gu's Zai for a while before leaving with Lonisara. Coming out of King Grantang, Lingdong asked, Princess, I want to visit the Silver Tower. Gu Huayu turned to look at Lonisara, do you want to buy jewelry? Landong nodded, it's the princess haircut ceremony soon. I want to choose a gift for the princess. Gu Huayu felt warm in her heart and said, no need to spend money, I don't need any gifts. Lingdong insisted, I know that the princess is in need of nothing, but I just want to give the princess something. I hope the princess will fulfill this little thought. I have received your message. It is not easy for you to save some money, so you can keep it for yourself. I follow the princess, I have nothing to worry about food and clothing, and I have no place to spend money. If I were not the princess, I would have been reincarnated for many years, so how could I enjoy the blessings I have now? Seeing her insistence, Gu Huayu couldn't resist her kindness. She thought about it and said, okay, let's make an agreement first and don't buy expensive ones. The princess does not need to save money for the slaves have money. Gu Huayu smiled and said, how much money do you have? Keep your money and use it as a dowry in the future. Lingdong shook his head and said, I don't want to get married. I will follow the princess all my life and serve the princess my whole life. Gu Huayu took Liandong's hand and walked forward, you're talking nonsense again. You can follow me even if you get married. Why don't you get married? Lonisara said, It's different. Gu Huayu turned her head to look at Lonicera and asked, what's the difference? If you don't marry, you only have the princess in your eyes and heart. If you marry someone, you will have children. If you have a man and a child, you will not be able to serve the princess wholeheartedly. From the day the princess rescued the slave swore that she would be kind to the princess and only the princess. While Gu Huayu was moved, she was thinking about how to persuade Lonicera. Ling Dong seemed to have seen through Gu Huayu's thoughts, and then said, Princess, you don't need to persuade me, I have already figured it out. Gu Huayu looked at Lonicera Japonica, feeling moved but also a little worried. What should she do if she suddenly disappears from this world one day? The people around her may be capable or have relatives, but Lonicera is the only one who followed her at a young age and has no skills. Apart from her, she has no relatives. Gu Huayu slid her hand down and held Lonicera's hand. Silly girl, she said silly things again. Some people like her more and more as they get more points. For example, your liking for me and your kindness to me. You are married and have children. Because of you, your children also like me and will be nice to me. The fact that you started a family has not reduced your kindness to me, but has doubled your kindness to me. Ling Dong thought for a while, shook his head and said, no, what if I find a man like my father who, besides drinking, beats his wife and children? If I don't marry, I will follow the princess. Gu Huayu squeezed Lonicera's hand and said, this is not Shanghai village, and there is no man like Zhang Erwei around me. Landong looked up at Gu Huayu and asked, didn't the princess marry off her slave? Gu Huayu smiled, there are a lot of bachelors in our family, and we can't solve it internally. How can the rich water flow to outsiders? What do you think of King Yu? If I promise you to King Yu, will you be willing? Thinking of King Yu, Gu Hua was so blessed that she looked at Lonicera and asked. Ling Dong blushed, lowered his head, and said sheepishly, I haven't thought about it, I don't know. Gu Huayu said with a smile, then start thinking about it from now on, and let me know when you think about it. Are you going to the silver building yet? Lonicera nodded repeatedly, go. Let's go, there are 2 silver shops on Bei's Hang Road ahead, let's go and take a look. The two were walking on Bei's Hang Road. Gu Huayu pulled Lonicera and walked to the right, go this way. Gu Xiao. Gu Huayu stopped when she heard the sound, turned around and looked over, and saw Li Tao chasing after her. Why are you here? Gu Huayu asked. Li Tao caught up in a few steps, raised his hand and gave Gu Huayu a chestnut. Gu Huayu didn't expect him to attack when he came up. She couldn't avoid being knocked on the head. Li Er, are you looking for a beating? Gu Huayu touched her head in pain and bared her teeth at Li Tao. Stinky girl, how long have you been back in Beijing? Have you sent someone to tell me? You didn't tell me when you left, and you won't tell me when you come back. Tell me, do you still think of me as a friend? Gu Huayu stood back with a guilty conscience. In the past few days since she came back, things had been going up and down one after another. She really didn't think of Li Tao. Of course, you can't say this to Li Tao. Gu Huayu stammered, what, aren't you preparing for the spring festival? How can I dare to disturb you during this critical period? Li Tao stared at Gu Huayu and asked, damn girl, did you not think of me at all? Gu Huayu did not dare to look at Li Tao and denied it, how is it possible? Li Er, am I the kind of unkind and unjust person in your mind? I only care about you, but you dare to wrongly accuse me. Looking at Gu Huayu's aggrieved sample, Li Tao suddenly lost his confidence. He lowered his head and apologized, are you angry? I'm sorry, I wrongly blamed you. Seeing that Li Tao was no longer concerned about the matter, Gu Huayu hurried down and said, I'm not angry. I'm not a stingy person. Why are you here? Li Tao said, come to look for you. I met Qing Yu on Jinshui Road. He said you were here, so I came to look for you. Where are you two going? Ling Dong then interjected, bowed his knees and said, Hello, Mr. Li, on the first day of the new year in the mansion, I will give you a hairpin ceremony for the county master. I want to give a gift to the princess, so I asked the princess to take me to the silver building to see it. Li Chao raised his hand again. Gu Huayu stared at his hand and said, What do you want to do? Put away your paws. Li Tao asked, Smelly girl, if I hadn't met you today, wouldn't you have even planned to tell me? How could it be? I plan to ask someone to tell you tomorrow. Li Tao stared at Gu Huayu, really? Really, more real than pearls. Li Tao said, Okay, I'll trust you once. Let's go to the silver house to pick out a gift for you. Gu Huayu smiled and said, One or two, they all want to give me gifts. I've made a lot of money today. You bastard, let's go. Li Tao walked forward. As he walked, he said, Fulong Silver House or Baoking Silver House, which one should I go to? Gu Huayu replied, Whatever. With that said, Gu Huayu raised her head and looked forward. Baoking Silver Tower is closer. Let's go to Baoking Silver Tower first. Li Tao nodded and said, Okay, let's go. The three of them crossed to the opposite side of the street and headed towards Baoking Silver Tower. When the waiter saw a guest coming to the door, he greeted him with a smile, Sir, please come to the room. Li Tao took the lead into the store, turned to Gu Huayu and said, Xiao, what do you like? Gu Huayu said, Anything is fine, it's just my heart. I like whatever you give me. Li Tao looked back at her and said, What you said is as if you didn't answer. Li Tao didn't get an answer from Gu Huayu, so he turned to the waiter and asked, Girl's haircut gift, what kind of gift would be more appropriate? The waiter blurted out, Giving a hairpin to a girl's family is the most appropriate gift. When Gu Huayu heard this, she was so frightened that she hurriedly said, Farewell, I have prepared the hairpin to say goodbye. How can hairpins be given away casually? If King Qin's jealous king knew about it, she would have to spend all her time explaining it. Li Tao didn't understand these common things. After listening to Gu Huayu's words, he asked the waiter, What else is there? It needs to be expensive. When the waiter heard that it was expensive, he immediately became energetic. He said, Girls and queens with hairpins will inevitably be able to dress themselves up. The young master can give you a complete set of hair and facial hair, which is both elegant and practical. Gu Huayu asked, What's in the whole set of hair? The waiter leaned forward and said, Miss, I have 3 hair combs, a pair of hairpins, and a pair of hairpins. Li Tao asked, Is there any ready-made one? Let's take a look. Hello. Sir, please come with me. The 3 of them followed the waiter to the 2nd floor. Sit over here, sir, Xiang and serve tea. The waiter asked the 3 of them to sit down, and then raised his voice and gave instructions to his colleagues. After a while, a child of 12 or 13 years old came over with tea. Li Tao first took a cup of tea from the tray and put it in front of Gu Huayu, then put a cup on the other side and said to Lonicera, You can sit down too. Gu Huayu said, Lonicera, come and sit down. How could Lonicera dare to sit at the same table as Gu Huayu and Li Tao? He hurriedly waved his hands and said, No, I just need to stand. You are a rich boss now, come on, come and sit down quickly. Li Tao picked up the teacup and took a sip of tea, and asked, What gift are you going to give your master? Landong looked at Gu Huayu and said, How about I give the princess a bracelet? Li Tao took over the words, A bracelet as a gift? Gold or jade? Gold and jade are not cheap. Landong looked at Li Tao nervously and asked, Mr. Li, how much silver does a pair of fine jade bracelets cost? Li Tao stretched out his hand and said, At least this is the number. Landong asked in a low voice, 5,000 taels of silver. Li Tao shook his head and said, That's not necessary. 500 taels will be spent. After hearing what Li Tao said, Lonicera breathed a sigh of relief, nodded and said, okay. Li Tao opened his eyes wide and looked at Gu Huayu. That's right. The little maid in your house is rich enough. She can earn 500 taels of silver without blinking an eye. Gu Huayu said, this girl doesn't usually spend money. She has saved so much money for several years. Li Tao looked at Lonicera. You have saved up your capital for several years and bought all the gifts. Aren't you heartbroken? Landong shook her head and said, I will give you flowers to the princess, and I will be happy to do so. Li Tao looked at Lonicera and nodded. He is loyal, not bad. Gu Huayu said to Lonicera, I don't like wearing bracelets, so there is no need to buy jade bracelets. Just buy me a jade hasta. Princess, you don't have to save money for me. Sir, please take a look. The waiter came over with 2 boxes and put them on the table. This set of hair and noodles is the most fashionable style nowadays. The petals are made of red gold and the workmanship is extremely complicated. It took 3 masters half a year to make such a set of hair and noodles. Looking at the golden headband, Gu Huayu had to admire the craftsman's skill, and the veins could be seen in every petal. How much does this pullover cost? Gu Huayu asked. The waiter replied, Miss, this is the best noodle in our shop. It costs 6,000 taels of silver. Dongzi, my master is here, take his head and face. Dongzi stood up straight, turned around and replied, Shopkeeper, the young one is waiting for the guests. Shopkeeper, go get the little one. The shopkeeper turned to the person behind him and said, Miss Third, please go to the living room and wait for a moment while Xiang goes to fetch you a face. Gu Huayu looked towards the stairs. When she saw Wang Peiyun appearing, she secretly sighed in her heart that she hadn't read the almanac since she went out today. In the Shi mansion, I met Princess Xiwen, who disliked me. When I went out to go shopping, I also met Miss Wang San. Li Tao whispered to Gu Huayu, it's all my fault. I forgot to tell you that Baoking Silver Tower is the dowry of Mrs. Shangguan. Gu Huayu shook her head and said softly, it doesn't matter. Wang Peiyun also saw Gu Huayu and the other 3 walking over with half-smiling faces, bowed slightly and said, hello, Princess Yanran, and Mr. Li. Gu Huayu and Li Tao stood up and returned the courtesy. Landong quickly stood up and stood behind Gu Huayu. Wang Peiyun came over, sat down directly at the table, looked at the dishes on the table, and asked with a smile, second young master Li is buying the noodles for the princess. Li Tao said, bring the princess here to have a look and see if there is anything she likes. The princess is so lucky to have met such a good man like Mr. Li who treats the princess warmly, considerately, and generously. Wang Peiyun's double entendre can be understood by anyone. Gu Huayu was amused. Seeing the rhythm of Wang Peiyun's words, she wanted to spread the scandal about her. After all, Miss Wang San has a good vision. She understands a man so well that she only needs to meet him once and take a quick glance at him to know whether the man is warm, considerate, generous, and open-minded. How did Miss Wang San develop such a discerning eye? Is it the experience gained from seeing a lot and going through hundreds of battles? Looking at our close relationship, can Ms. Wang San teach me a few tricks? Gu Huayu asked sincerely and with an open mind. Wang Peiyun turned blue with anger. You. Gu Huayu looked confused, turned to look at Li Tao, and asked, what's wrong with me? Did I say something wrong? Miss Wang San seems a little angry. Li Tao glanced at Wang Peiyun and said, you are right, Miss Wang San is really discerning. When she meets me, she knows that I am very warm. I am indeed very warm, and I don't even need a thick quilt when sleeping in winter. As for being considerate, I am indeed very considerate, especially if I want to be nice to her, I will use up all my tenderness. I would also like to ask Miss Wang San, how did you figure it out? We must not be familiar with each other, right? After speaking, Li Tao also looked at Wang Piyun with curiosity, waiting for Wang Piyun's reply. Gu Huayu is quite satisfied with the tacit understanding with Li Tao. Yes, Ms. Wang San will share with you, we are very curious. Gu Huayu held her chin in her hands and stared at Wang Piyun. The shopkeeper saw that his boss was speechless by Gu Huayu and Li Tao singing and singing. He was thinking about how to help his boss out of the siege. He turned around and saw Xiang Er coming out with his head held high. He felt happy and said, "My boss, the head, and Noodles are here, please move over here." End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 319. Chapter 319 Opportunity. Okay, I understand, Wang Piyun responded to shopkeeper Lu. When he stood up, he glanced at the buns on the table and said, "It took Master Wang and the others half a year to make this set of buns. They are missing 8,000 taels of silver cell." Gu Huayu and Li Tao looked at each other and stood up without saying a word. As soon as Dongzi saw that the guest was about to leave, he hurriedly asked, "Guest, what are you doing?" Li Tao said to the waiter, "Thank you, second brother, let's go to another place to have a look." Wang Piyun said sarcastically, "What? Mr. Li is reluctant to spend 8,000 taels of silver for Princess Yan Ran." Wang Piyun's words made Li Tao, who was walking towards the stairs, stop. He turned back and took a deep look at Wang Piyun, and said, "I can't bear to part with you, 8,000 taels of silver. I still have it. I simply feel that the appearance of this outfit is good generally, it's not worth it, so we decided to go to Fulong Silver Tower. The boss of Baoking Silver House is mediocre in appearance and appearance. Is Mr. Li serious? Our Baoking Silver House started as a boss. Baoking Silver Tower has gathered most of the skilled craftsmen in the capital. In Beijing, when it comes to being first, Baoking is second. Which bank dares to stand up and say that it is first?" Wang Piyun replied angrily when his proud reputation was questioned. Wang Piyun's voice echoed throughout the second floor, causing other customers to stop what they were doing and come here one after another. Shopkeeper Lu looked at Wang Piyun in astonishment and couldn't believe his eyes. Is this the third lady who behaves well and speaks in a moderate manner? Why are you so restless? Shopkeeper Lu wanted to step forward and block her mouth with his hands. Gu Huayu was shocked by Wang Piyun's stupidity. Shouldn't the daughter of the Prime Minister's house be humble and polite? Gu Huayu sneered, "Haha, Miss Wang San is saying too much, isn't it? Baoking Silver House started out as a top-notch business, so it must be good if it does top-notch business. Other silver houses didn't start out as a top-notch business, so if they do top-notch business, they will be inferior." Not really. Wang Piyun glared at Gu Huayu. If Princess Yan Ran can't afford it, then she can't afford it. Just say you can't afford it. No one here will laugh at you. As a person who grew up in the mountains, it is not your fault that you are poor, but it is your fault that you are still making judgments about people who are poor. People need to be self-aware and weigh their own weight first. What qualifications does a country bumpkin who has never seen anything in the world have to speak here? Who are you? Wang Piyun glanced sideways at Gu Huayu, his disgusted expression clearly visible. Seeing Wang Piyun's personal attack on Gu Huayu, Li Tao stepped forward and said, "Miss Wang San, I don't know who Princess Yan Ran is. Miss Wang San's words today are mine." Li Tao raised his thumb downwards as he spoke, without pausing for a moment. "Miss Wang San is indeed the concubine of the Prime Minister Wang's mansion. The person who is about to become the virtuous princess is speaking rudely and aggressively. What's wrong? This is the Prime Minister Wang's mansion tutor? If you don't buy things at Baoking Silver Building, you are poor and you don't have money. If you don't like the style of Baoking silver building, you just don't know how to appreciate it. Everyone in the capital has to come to Baoking silver building to buy jewelry. And when you come, you have to buy it without questioning, otherwise, you are poor. Wang Piyun realized that he had gotten into trouble and hurriedly defended, I didn't say that. How could Li Tao give her a chance to defend herself? He interrupted her and said, isn't that what you said? In the whole capital, only Baoking Yinlu has a good-looking head and face. No one else is as good as Baoking Yinlu. Baoking Yinlu must dare to say it. Secondly, no one dares to be number one. Miss Wang San is not afraid of speaking big words, and her tongue flashes when the wind is strong. You all have seen and heard that if you don't buy something when you come to Baoking silver building, you are poor. If you don't like the style of their home, it means you don't have good taste and don't know how to appreciate it. Are you here to buy things, to buy joy, or to be ridiculed? Princess, let's go. Gu Huayu looked back at the people on the table and said, are you leaving now? Li Tao said angrily, why don't you leave and let others continue to ridicule you? Gu Huayu said, let's go, but before I go, I want to speak clearly. With this appearance, the second brother quoted us 6,000 taels of silver. Miss Wang San came up and said that she would not buy it because it was 8,000 taels of silver short. The price difference between the front and back quotes was 2,000 taels, which made me feel that Baoking Silver House did not live up to the word honesty. So, we are not willing to buy things at Baoking Silver Building. Lonisara, let's go to Fulong Silver Building next door. Landong immediately responded, okay, the slave is here. Li Tao took the lead towards the stairs and said to the onlookers, are you still not leaving? Are you waiting to be slaughtered and ridiculed? Someone took the lead and said, let's go to Fulong Silver Tower. Someone took the lead, and others responded, let's go to Fulong Silver House together. Wang Piyun was so angry that he shouted irrationally, Gu Huayu, just wait for me. Gu Huayu stopped, turned to look at Wang Piyun, and said word by word, what? Miss Wang San is so angry that she wants to retaliate against me. I implore everyone present to bear witness. If there is anything wrong with me, Hua Yan Ran, you can help my grandmother and my adoptive parents bear witness that Miss Wang San is the mastermind behind my murder. Li Tao had already reached the stairs and turned around and said, she dares. The prince breaks the law and the common people are guilty. No matter she is the third lady of the Wangxiang mansion or the virtuous princess, she can't even think of doing anything wrong. Princess, let's go, don't take care of her. Out of Baoking Silver Building, Gu Huayu whispered to Lonisara, go forward along Bai's Hang Road, and after 2 intersections you will reach Maxing Street. Turn right at Maxing Street, and walk more than 10 feet to Dichang Bank. Go to the bank to find Sui Er and ask him to bring you 100,000 taels of silver notes. Tell him that I have something urgent, so go and come back as soon as possible. Landong bowed down and said, I understand. After saying that, Lonisaro left quickly. Li Tao looked at Lonisaro leaving and asked in a low voice, where did you ask the girl to go? To get the silver. Gu Huayu nodded and said, I will replenish your gift next time. Today I want to short Fulong Silver House and slap Miss Wang San in the face. Li Tao smiled and said, Gu Xiao, do you want to argue with a brainless person? Gu Huayu said, this is not something to be careless about. Wang Piyun has set up the ladder for me. If I don't take advantage of this opportunity, wouldn't I be stupid? Li Tao smiled and asked, what do you want to do? Gu Huayu said softly, teach Baoking Yinlu a lesson, you can also say give Mrs. Shangguan a lesson. Have I offended you, Shangguan? Gu Huayu looked up at Li Tao and said, yes, I had a problem with her. What happened, when did it happen? Gu Huayu said, it's a long story. I'll tell you slowly when I have time later. Li Tao nodded, okay, what do you want to do? What can I do? Gu Huayu thought for a while. There is no need to do anything else. Just speak out angrily about the injustice encountered in Baoking Silver Tower. The angrier the better. Let's make today's matter a big deal and make it known throughout the city. Li Tao understood and came over. Okay, don't worry, I know what's going on. Come and see me. After saying that, Li Tao walked quickly towards Fulong Silver Tower. The waiter at Fulong Yinlu saw Li Tao coming angrily, followed by a group of people. He thought he was here to cause trouble, so he turned around and ran into the house in fright. Shopkeeper, it's not good, someone rushed over. Shopkeeper, he looked up, and before he could realize what was going on, Li Tao had already entered the shop. Shopkeeper, he quickly walked out from behind the counter, bowed to Li Tao and said, Second Master Li is here, but I'm sorry to welcome him from afar. I wonder what Mr. Li needs to buy? I'll do my best to serve Second Master Li. Li Tao waved his hands angrily. Stop talking nonsense, I've brought out the best in the shop. Shopkeeper, he looked at Li Tao in confusion. Second Master, do you want to buy some noodles? Second Master, don't worry, we have some noodles. I'll send someone to get them now. Second Master, please sit down. Wang Xinmin, hurry up and serve tea to the Second Master. Li San, go and get the noodles from Pearl Pavilion. Gu Huayu walked into the shop and said to Li Tao, are you still angry? What's there to be angry about? Baoking Yinlu is not the only shop in the capital. She doesn't speak well, so let's just turn around and leave. What's there to be angry about? After listening to Gu Huayu's words, shopkeeper, he seemed to have some clues. He looked at Gu Huayu and said, Miss, is she also from the Li family? Gu Huayu shook his head. Without waiting for Gu Huayu's reply, Li Tao suppressed his anger and introduced, this is Princess Yan Ran. Shopkeeper, his eyes lit up when he looked at Gu Huayu. He bowed his hands and said, it's all because of my poor eyesight that I couldn't recognize the princess. Please forgive me. Gu Huayu shook her head and said, I don't blame the shopkeeper. I didn't grow up in the capital. The shopkeeper looks normal. Shopkeeper, he said a few polite words, turned to look at Li Tao, and asked, why is the Second Master so angry? Gu Huayu said, he is angry with the owner of Baoking Silver House. If any of you saw clearly what happened at Baoking Silver House just now, please tell the shopkeeper. There were many enthusiastic people watching the excitement, and they talked about the matter in a variety of ways. After hearing this, shopkeeper, he said with a smile, Second Master, come and have a cup of tea to calm down. The quality of the goods at Fulong Silver House is definitely not bad. The Second Master will know it as soon as he sees the goods. Fulong Yinlu has been in Beijing for 60 or 70 years. For decades, the owner has always put quality first. The masters who make jewelry in our silver house all pay high prices to bring them back. 2 of them were old masters who once worked in the Sichuanfang of the palace. It can be said that our Yinlu masters are among the best in the capital. Because of this, Fulong Silver House has been able to operate in the capital for 60 or 70 years. So, our jewelry is definitely no worse than Baoking Silver House, but our prices are the most reasonable. Our boss often says that doing business is not about 1 or 2 days, but long term. We do things with conscience, customers can see it, and justice is in the hearts of the people. Shopkeeper, he is indeed an old shopkeeper who has been in the shopping mall for many years. He is very good at sizing up the situation and taking the opportunity to publicize it to everyone. Gu Huayu gave him 2 thumbs up in her heart. Li Tao praised, look, compare the two, who is higher and who is lower. You can tell it at a glance, right? This is a conscientious shop that does things with conscience. Based on these few words from shopkeeper, from now on, the first choice for anyone in the Li family to buy jewelry is Fulong Silver. Gu Huayu took over and said, if you have anything to buy, hurry up and choose. Once you have made your choice, I will take the rest. Everyone present was stunned, staring at Gu Huayu in disbelief. Shopkeeper he came to his senses first and advised, Princess, there is no need for this, just buy as much as you need. Gu Huayu said, don't worry, shopkeeper, I'm not angry, I'm just going out to buy today. In a few days, 2 of my cousins will get married. One is Miss Shi-san from Shangshishi's house, and the other is my adoptive mother's cousin. The 2 sisters are very kind to me. They are getting married, so the younger sister will naturally send her good wishes. Furthermore, in a few days, I will move into the princess's mansion on Yongchun Road. The whole house needs new decorations and accessories. Shopkeeper he nodded happily, the princess is very magnanimous. The shopkeeper praised me too much. Compared with how well my sisters treated me, what I have done is too insignificant. The princess is not only generous, but also humble. She must be a blessed person. Gu Huayu smiled and said, thank you, shopkeeper. I accept the shopkeeper's good advice. After speaking, Gu Huayu asked the onlookers, do you still want to buy it? The onlookers were more interested in gossip than in shopping, and they all said, if you don't want to buy it, let the princess buy it. Gu Huayu blessed her body, then I'll thank you all here. Shopkeeper, let's get back to business and start ordering the goods, how about it? Shopkeeper he nodded repeatedly and said, okay, princess, wait a moment while I make arrangements. Gu Huayu nodded and said, okay, but it depends on the shopkeeper's arrangement. Shopkeeper he turned around and said to the onlookers, since you don't want to buy anything, why don't you come and sit over here? I'll let you have some tea while everyone sits down and watch. Everyone readily agreed. The shopkeeper he settled the people and called all the waiters in the shop over to give them instructions one by one. After some explanations, shopkeeper he came over and said to Gu Hua, Princess, I will have you send the ornaments one by one to the princess to look at. If the princess likes them, I will keep them as much as I can. How about that? Gu Huayu nodded, okay, trouble. Shopkeeper he said again and again, no trouble, this is my duty. After saying that, shopkeeper he shouted to the waiter, send the things here. 6 waiters delivered the ornaments one after another. After Gu Huayu looked at them, she accepted them all. The people sitting not far away who were watching all stretched their necks and looked excited. They were even happier than buying something themselves. At first, shopkeeper he was very happy when he saw that Gu Huayu had left one behind. As he watched, shopkeeper he felt increasingly uneasy as he saw the boxes piled higher and higher behind Gu Huayu. So he stepped forward and said, Princess, there are already a lot, right? Gu Huayu looked back and asked, have you seen all the accessories in the shop? Shopkeeper he looked back at Wang Xinmin and asked, is there any more? Wang Xinmin leaned forward and said, go back to the shopkeeper, there are still some from FemalePavilion that I haven't taken. Shopkeeper he turned to Gu Huayu and said, Princess, the ornaments in FemalePavilion are mostly for birthday celebrations for the elderly and are not suitable for adding makeup. End of this chapter. The Rebirth of Space, the lucky girl from a farm family. Author, he would fire every. Chapter 320. Chapter 320, Being on Guard Against Others. Gu Huayu looked back at the gift boxes piled up like a hill, nodded and said, okay, let's check out. Li Tao looked at the mountains of jewelry and felt unsure. He thought that Gu Huayu's talk about buying out the bank was just an angry talk. He didn't expect her to mean it. Li Tao made a rough estimate. If he bought all these things, it would cost a small amount of 100,000 taels of silver. Li Tao looked back and forth between the gift box and Gu Huayu, then approached Gu Huayu and asked, Xiao, do you really want to buy it? Gu Huayu turned her head to meet Li Tao's gaze, what do you mean? You can shoot the bow and turn back. You have already ordered the items and you are asking someone to put them back. You just bought them when you said they would. Are you worried that I don't have money? No, you have a lot of people in your house, and the daily expenses are not small, so what? Shopkeeper, he is good, let's talk to him, buy less, just to vent your anger, there is no need to buy everything. Li Tao looked at Gu Huayu's face as he spoke apologetically. He was afraid that Gu Huayu would be unhappy after squandering all the money, and he was also afraid that he would hurt her self-esteem by speaking too openly. From Li Tao's point of view, Gu Huayu's money is the gold and silver that the emperor rewarded her with. Today Gu Huayu spent 100,000 to vent her anger, and tomorrow she will spend another 80,000 for other things. Her little family fortune must have been wiped out by her long ago. As a friend, he couldn't watch her jump into the pit. Gu Huayu understood Li Tao's good intentions and patiently whispered, I know you are doing it for my own good, but you don't have to worry about me, I know it well. Even if you don't buy these things today, you will buy them someday. Even if you buy it, how can you buy so much? Gu Huayu replied, there are many women in the house who can be used. Shishan's relatives arrived, and she hadn't bothered to buy them some outfits, so she just had them all ready this time. Li Tao felt a little more at ease after hearing what Gu Huayu said, but he still felt that the money was spent too much. But Gu Huayu smiled and said, don't worry, these are all within my budget, I know it well. Princess, Sui-er entered the room and walked towards Gu Huayu. Gu Huayu smiled and nodded towards Sui-er, here we come. Sui-er came over and bowed to Li Tao to greet him. Manager Su, shopkeeper, he raised his head and shouted in surprise when he heard the voice. Sui-er looked at shopkeeper, he bowed his hands and said, hello, shopkeeper, he. Shopkeeper, he looked at Gu Huayu, then at Sui-er, and asked, Manager Su and the princess. Sui-er smiled and said, the princess is my boss. Shopkeeper, his eyes suddenly lit up, and he looked at Gu Huayu more eagerly than before. Dichang Bank is the property of the princess. No wonder the princess buys jewelry like cabbage. Seeing shopkeeper he's excitement, Gu Huayu was afraid that he would blurt out something, so she hurriedly said, has shopkeeper he done the calculation? How much money is it in total? Shopkeeper, he is also a person who has seen countless people. He immediately understood what Gu Huayu meant and said with a smile, it's almost time. Princess, please wait a moment. Sui-er said to Gu Hua, Princess, I will go and have a look. Gu Huayu nodded and said, okay. Sui-er turned around and walked to shopkeeper he, and the two started chatting. About a quarter of an hour later, Sui-er returned to Gu Huayu and said, shopkeeper he has the authority to give you a 15% discount on all accessories. If you are the master of Sunlu, you can get a 30% discount. Gu Huayu said, just give it an 85% discount. There is no need to make a special trip. Sui-er nodded, okay, I understand. After Sui-er left, Li Tao asked, Xiao, are you familiar with the head of the building? Gu Huayu shook her head, I'm not familiar with it, so I'm embarrassed to ask the owner to get a discount. Princess, there are a total of 2,232 pieces of jewelry, large and small, totaling 85,460 taels of silver. The small one is given to the princess at a 15% discount, so the total is 72,640 taels. One tael shopkeeper he came over and reported. Gu Huayu nodded, okay, I understand. Manager Su will settle the bill with you after that. Gu Huayu looked at Sui-er and said, please take the things back to the house. By the way, I have an extra 100 taels of silver so that shopkeeper he can treat them to a meal. Gu Huayu pointed at the people watching the excitement. Sui-er bowed and said, okay, I understand. Gu Huayu stood up and said to Li Tao, let's go. Li Doqi stood up and left Fulong Silver House. Xiao, do you want to consider opening a silver house? Gu Huayu turned her head to look at Li Tao and asked, I purchased the goods at a 15% discount. How much money do you think it would be cost-effective to sell them for? With more than 2,000 ornaments, the women in your house don't have to do anything all day long, they only think about how to dress. Gu Huayu said, who said it's all for them? Give them a few sets each. The rest, I can put them in Huayu Pavilion and make promotional items in half a day. How much money did the guests spend, what kind of gifts did they give them, after all until? Li Tao's eyes lit up and he gave Gu Huayu a thumbs up, this is a good idea. Gu Huayu glanced at him and said, I told you that I know what's going on. Let's go and I'll treat you to a meal. Li Tao followed up in 2 steps, if you stay with me, why do you need to spend money? What do you want to eat? I'll treat you. Gu Huayu turned around and asked Lonicera, what does Lonicera want to eat? Before the gift was delivered, Lonicera was wondering about the gift, when he suddenly heard Gu Huayu's question and blurted out, hairpin. Li Tao laughed loudly and said to Gu Hua, I think she is crazy. She is still thinking about the hairpin. Your master asked you what you want to eat? Landong glanced at Gu Huayu and said somewhat at a loss, I'm not picky about food, I can do anything. Li Tao looked at Gu Huayu with a smile, if you say it, you haven't said it yet. You have to come and think about it. What do you want to eat? Gu Huayu thought for a while and said, this is not far from Lujiazhuang. How about we go to Lujiazhuang to eat roasted whole lamb? Okay, let's go. On the other side, King Qin and Ruan Chu came out of the upper study room and met Li Cheng coming out of Zhang Shangshi room. Li Cheng bowed his hands in greeting and asked, is your majesty about to go to the yamen? King Qin nodded, yes. Li Cheng then said, do you have something to do with your majesty? I have made an appointment with Min Zi and Huan Zi to get together, your majesty. King Qin shook his head and said, no, I still have something to do today. I will be the host another day. Please treat me. It was not that the king of Qin had something to do, but that he had to explain to Ruan Chu in advance before he could go. Ruan Chu said that this was what his father repeatedly told him. If he changed his itinerary temporarily, Ruan Chu would have to go through a lot of trouble to make arrangements. He was a person who did not want to cause trouble to others. Li Cheng felt a little disappointed when King Qin refused, so he smiled and bowed to say goodbye. The king of Qin left the yamen. Rugjuan saw him and hurriedly drove over. After King Qin got on the carriage, he said, go to Chang'an restaurant. As Rugjuan drove the carriage, Ruan Chu rode beside him and said, Your Majesty, Lu Yu, Zhang Che and Li Cheng have been traveling very frequently recently. King Qin leaned against the carriage and said calmly, it's normal. Lu Yu, Zhang Che and Li Cheng are always close to each other, so don't worry too much. Ruan Chu leaned over and said, I understand. King Qin continued, when I was in the capital in the past few years, I often interacted with them. In addition to the 3 of them, there are also several brothers from Zhangying and Shifu. We all get together every once in a while. Ruan Chu asked, where are the wise king and the British princes? There will also be gatherings, but where there is a wise king, Zhangying and the Shi brothers rarely attend. Zhangying and the king of Qi are closer, and the Shi brothers are impartial and try not to have too much contact with any prince. Contacts. Ruan Chu said, thank you, Your Majesty, for telling me. I grew up in a military camp and know very little about these things. It's normal. The circles are different, and the things we know are naturally different. Have you found out? What is the current situation of Long Shadow Guard? King Qin asked. Rugjuan replied, Master Hui, there are serious cliques within the Lunjiang Guard, among which the 3 factions of Yang Jian, Li Feng and An Shangmen are the largest. Behind Yang Jian is Huarujun. An Shangmen's father, An Zhengtian, is a subordinate of the British Duke. Li Feng used to be Huasu's subordinate, but now he is on Huaru Iming's side. There are several other small factions. Their numbers are not large and they have not yet formed a climate, so they do not pay much attention to them. Diung, under the name of Long Yingwei, now only has 2 stores in the west and north of the city left in the capital, and the rest are all closed. The business of Baofeng Bank is also not as good as before. It is not clear how much the loss is. However, Baofeng Bank dismissed 4 accountants this month. It is conceivable that there should be a big loss in the business. If it weren't for the imperial court's fixed monthly subsidies, Longjingwei would have been disbanded long ago. Of course, there have been quite a few people who voluntarily resigned because they thought the monthly salary was too low. King Qin asked, "Where have all the people who left Lunjing Guard gone?" Rugjuan replied, "Most people went to Shunfeng Escort Agency, and a small number went to Shunfeng Carriage and Horse Store. Both Shunfeng Escort Agency and Shunfeng Carriage and Horse Store are owned by Huarujun." King Qin nodded lightly and said, "We all went to Huarujun's door. Next, let people keep an eye on Huarujun." Xian leaned forward and said, "Yes, I have arranged for someone to keep an eye on me." Rugjuan responded and turned the carriage into the backyard of Chang'an Restaurant. "Your Majesty, we are here." King Qin got down from the car and went straight to the second floor. When passing by a private room, he heard a conversation in the room, "Short buying a bank house. Princess Yan Ran has so much money. Where did she get the money?" Another voice sounded, "You are asking the right person. At first I had the same idea as you, Princess Yan Ran, a girl who grew up in the countryside, how could she get so much money? For this reason, I specially asked someone to inquire about it. This inquiry really shocked me. Guess what? Sir, General Ruan, you." Ruan Chu raised a finger to signal Rugjuan to be silent. Rugjuan immediately stopped talking. The people in the room were unaware that anyone was listening to the wall, and then asked, "What's the matter?" "Let me tell you, Princess Yan Ran is definitely capable. She knew that she could not live her whole life relying on the reward from the emperor, so she used the money from the emperor's reward as principal and started a business. Do you know about the shop called Huayuj in Daowenjian? If you don't know, go back and ask your wife. Your wife must know. My mother-in-law goes there almost every month. I know that shop. My wife also goes there once a month, saying she wants to stock up on her lipstick colors. Yes, my mother-in-law said the same thing. Huayuj's lipsticks alone have more than 10 kinds of reds, and there are also many kinds of rouges. This is not the most important thing. Huayuj is most famous for its fragrant dew, which is available for both men and women. Huayuj is the first store to let men buy fragrant dew. The business is so good that it is beyond our imagination. The money earned can be imagined. No wonder Princess Yan Ran would be so bold as to short Fulong Silver House. Miss Wang San is the same. Who can't be provoked, but Princess Yan Ran. Not only did he lose a big customer, he also gained a reputation for being arrogant and rude. When King Qin heard this, he walked forward, entered the private room, and said to Rugjuan, "Go and find out what happened to Xiao's short purchase of Fulong Silver Tower." Rugjuan nodded in agreement, "Yes, go right away." Not long after Rugjuan left, he came back excitedly and reported the news he had learned to King Qin. The princess and second young master Li went to Baoking Silver House first. Second young master Li asked the waiter to bring out a set of facial expressions just as the princess and second young master Li were looking at the first appearance. Third Miss Wang arrived. When Miss Wang San saw the princess, she not only mocked the princess, but also overpaid the princess by 2,000 taels for the face she was looking at. The princess and Li Ershao thought that Baoking Silver Tower was dishonest because of the price increase, so they went to look at other houses. When Miss Wang San saw that the princess was about to leave, she mocked the princess for being poor and unable to buy anything. As a result, the princess bought out the nearby Fulong Silver building and slapped Miss Wang San hard in the face. At that time, there were many guests at Baoking Silver House and Fulong Silver House, who witnessed the farce and spread the news. There are all kinds of rhetoric, and most people are saying that Miss Wang San is uneducated. King Qin asked, "Is the Baoking Silver Tower the property of the Prime Minister's mansion?" Rugjuan replied, "Yes, Baoking Silver Tower is the dowry of Mrs. Shangguan." King Qin thought for a while and said, "Make good use of the word integrity to add firewood to Baoking Silver Tower and send Baotai Silver Tower to the wind." Rugjuan leaned forward and said, "Okay, I understand. Where is Miss Wang San? Do you want to teach her a lesson?" King Qin said, "No need, the matter has spread, and there are many people who question the tutor of the Prime Minister." Rugjuan retreated, and as soon as he reached the door, King Qin continued, "Let me go and have a look." "Has Xiao returned to Wuotong Lane?" "Yes, I'll make arrangements right away." After Rugjuan stepped back, Ruan Chu asked curiously, "The princess is very familiar with Mr. Li? How did they know each other?" King Qin nodded and said, "They have been friends for 5 or 6 years." After saying that, King Qin briefly told the story of Gu Huayu and Li Tao's acquaintance. Ruan Chu said, "The princess is close to the second young master Li, and the second young master Li and the king of Qi." Ruan Chu did not say the next words. King Qin understood what he meant, took a sip of tea and said, "Don't worry, Li Tao is an upright person, so he shouldn't harm Xiao. However, we must be on guard against others." Ruan Chu continued. King Qin shook his head slightly. "In the capital, the only people Xiao can talk to are Shi Yamei and Li Tao. Besides, some things vary from person to person. I know Li Tao fairly well, and I don't believe he can do it. Take advantage of Xiao." End of this chapter.